Welcome to Mr. Nightbleed. Tonight, in 5 creepiest true stories from abandoned American cemeteries, we step into the forgotten places scattered across the United States. Those overgrown burial grounds, where the roads end, the fences break, and the living rarely trespass. These are the cemeteries time has left behind. Graveyards swallowed by forests, tombstones cracked open by decades, and resting places where something still moves long after the mourners are gone. Every account you're about to hear is real, shared by those who wandered into these abandoned cemeteries and felt the unmistakable presence of something that should have stayed buried. My goal this month is to reach 4,000 subscribers. Almost 90% of viewers slip into the darkness, listen, and disappear without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Join the shadows. Subscribe now. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what hour of the night it is for you. And if there's an abandoned graveyard or forgotten cemetery in your area that truly unsettles you, type its name below, because once the world sleeps and the night settles in, kill the lights, quiet your breathing, and let us begin. Kill the lights. My name's Caleb Turner. I'm from just outside Pine Hollow, Pennsylvania, and I work as a mechanic at a little family garage off the highway, the kind of place where you fix more rust than engines, and everybody thinks they know your schedule better than you do. And I need you to listen to me, because I am sitting in my car right now with the engine off, parked across from the old cemetery on the hill, and my hands are shaking so bad I can hear my keys tapping against the steering column when I move them. And I keep checking the battery light like that is the real problem tonight when it isn't. Not even close. And if my voice cracks or I start to ramble, I swear to God I'm not doing it for effect. I just haven't slept right since that night, and talking about it feels like pulling glass out of my own skin, one piece at a time. So let me start simple, with the kind of details nobody would bother to make up, because that's the only way I can convince myself this all still happened. The way I remember it, even if part of my brain keeps trying to say it didn't, that it was just a stupid dare that got out of hand and I should get over it by now. And you'll understand why by the end if I can get through this without losing my nerve again like I have every time I tried to record this before and deleted it. I had cereal that morning, nothing special, just the cheap off-brand cornflakes that get soggy too fast. And I remember that because the milk was right on the edge of turning, it smelled a little sweet, and my mom told me to throw it out if it tasted weird. But I ate it anyway, because I was late, like always, and I had on this gray hoodie with a tiny oil stain on the sleeve from the day before, when I'd helped my uncle change the brake pads on his truck, and I remember staring at that stain on the bus and rubbing it with my thumb, thinking it looked like the shape of the hill where the cemetery sits above town. And I only remember that because later, after everything, I tried to wash that hoodie 3 times, and that little blotch never came out, and it's still in the back of my closet even though I can't stand to put it on. Back then, I was 17, still in high school, still pretending like I had a plan after graduation that wasn't just ending up at the same garage I'm working at now. And Pine Hollow was exactly what it sounds like, a town that smells like wet leaves half the year, and road salt the other half, with one main street, one grocery store, one diner, and one cemetery that everybody knew about, but nobody talked about unless it was to tell some dumb story. The cemetery sits on this low hill on the edge of town, trees all around it, the kind of bare trunks that always seem to lean a little the wrong way, and you can see the tops of the older headstones from the road if you know where to look. All crooked and dark, stuck in this patch of ground that never seems to dry out. They closed it down before I was born. That part is just fact. There hadn't been a burial up there in decades. The newer graves are all in the flat, clean place on the other side of town with the nice paving and those shiny metal vases you can stick plastic flowers into. But the old hill cemetery was still there, fenced off with a rusty gate and a big chain everybody said was always locked. Every small town has one of those places. I guess the spot older kids use to scare younger kids. And in Pine Hollow, it was this graveyard. And the story that went with it was always the caretaker. I grew up hearing his name in whispers in the school hallway and on the bus, people arguing about whether he was real or just some made-up guy to go with the place. Some folks said he lived in a little house right by the cemetery fence and would walk the rows at night with a lantern, cleaning the moss off the stones and putting flowers back up when they fell. Others said the house caught fire with him inside and he never left his post. That you could still see his light moving between the graves if you were stupid enough to look up there after midnight. That was the kind of story that sounds fun when you're 9 and turns into background noise when you're 16, and then one night your friend looks at you on a slow Friday in winter and says you won't do it, you won't go see for yourself, and suddenly it isn't background anymore. The kind that's not fresh anymore, just hard and dirty from cars throwing slush at it all day. And the air had that sharp bite that gets into your fingers even through gloves. School had let out early because some storm was supposed to roll in, but nothing much happened. Just clouds and a little wind. And by evening, it felt more quiet than dangerous. I spent most of the afternoon in my room playing games and ignoring my homework, listening to the plow go up and down the street, and around 9 my phone buzzed and it was Ryan and Matt in the group chat, talking trash about how bored they were and how there was nothing to do in this town except walk circles around the gas station. I said something like, "Yeah, that," or "Go play tag with the dead guy on the hill," and they jumped on it right away. Ryan sent one of those laughing messages, and then, "You won't," and then, "Prove it." That's how serious it started. Not a ritual, not a seance, not even a plan. Just 3 stupid kids in a dead little town on a cold night, looking for something to make them feel alive. And my little sister was already asleep in the room next to mine. So when I texted that I was going over to Ryan's for a bit, nobody answered to tell me no. I remember checking the time when I pulled my hoodie on and zipped it halfway up, 10:16, and thinking I'd be back by midnight. Easy. And then I could say I did it. Show a picture or a video, and that would be the end of it. I walked down to the corner where Ryan's older cousin was parked in his beat-up sedan. Heater barely working. Radio playing low. And we piled in, me in the back, Ryan and Matt in front, arguing about who had to buy the next tank of gas. The whole thing felt light, stupid. Like anything you do as a teenager where you say you're not scared even though you are a little, in that fun way. We drove through town, past the diner, with the neon sign half out, past the empty grocery store lot, and then we took the road that curves up toward the hill, the one most people only use during the day because it's narrow and the snowplow always misses parts of it. You can see the cemetery fence from that road once you're close enough, the old iron bars and the gate at the bottom of a short set of concrete steps. Even from the car, even from the road, you can tell the ground inside is different. The snow sits in weird patches. Some places bare, some places piled, and the headstones lean in weird directions like they're trying to turn away from each other. I'd only ever seen it in daylight through a car window or from far off, never close, never at night. My chest felt tight as we pulled up, but I told myself it was just the cold. Ryan's cousin stopped the car about 30 yards down from the gate and killed the lights but left the engine idling. Said he wasn't getting out. But we had to be quick, because if a cop came by and saw us messing around near the cemetery, we'd get our parents called for sure. I remember how quiet it got when he turned the headlights off, how the hill swallowed the town noise, even though we were only a 5-minute drive away from Main Street. The only sound was the engine and the occasional crackle of snow under the tires when he shifted in his seat. Ryan turned around, grinning, and held up his phone like a microphone, said, "All right, Caleb, tour guide time," and then, "Dude, you're not chickening out, right?" I said no, shoved my hands in my pockets so they wouldn't see them shaking, and pushed the door open. The cold hit my face so hard my eyes watered. The sky was that low, heavy gray. The road salt crunched under my boots as I walked around the back of the car. Ryan and Matt followed me, hoods up, breath coming in little clouds, and Ryan's cousin just leaned back and pulled his beanie down over his eyes and told us not to do anything stupid. I wish I had turned around when he said that. I really, really wish I had. The steps up to the gate were covered in a thin layer of packed snow and ice, and I remember concentrating on not slipping, staring down at my boots, at the dark spots where the snow had melted and refrozen, thinking about how mad my mom would be if I came home with a torn knee in my jeans. When I looked up, I saw the gate properly for the first time. Everyone always said it was chained shut, that the town kept it locked so kids wouldn't go in. But that night, the chain was looped through the bars and hanging slack, not fastened, ends resting against each other like somebody had just taken it off and not bothered to put it back on. I stopped and stared at it and felt this little flip in my stomach, like missing a step on the stairs. Ryan bumped into my shoulder and told me to move, then froze when he saw what I was looking at. He said, "I thought you said it was locked." And I said, "That's what everybody says." And Matt laughed, but it was short and weird. I pushed the gate gently with my hand, and it swung inward without a sound. No creak, nothing, just this smooth movement. Snow grinding a little under the bottom rail. I don't know why, but that bothered me more than if it had squealed. Things that old aren't supposed to move that easy. Inside the fence, the cemetery opened up in rows that were hard to see in the dim light, just a scatter of dark shapes and pale patches of snow. Some of the headstones were almost lying flat, half buried. Some were tilted. Some were still upright. And the trees around the edge blocked whatever light was coming from the town, so it felt like stepping into a pocket where the world didn't reach. We hesitated there at the entrance, all three of us. And for a second I thought maybe we'd just take a picture at the gate and go back. But Ryan nudged me in the back and said, "Go on, man. You're already here. Just walk up to the big angel and touch it." That was the dare, remember. There is a statue near the top of the hill. Or there used to be. An angel with her head bowed, wings chipped, watching over a row of older graves. And kids at school used to say if you touched her hand at midnight, you'd feel someone squeeze back. It was one of those things you repeat without believing. Standing there in the dark with the gate open behind me, it felt less funny. I took out my phone and checked the time. It was 11:38, not midnight, not even close. And I told them I wasn't waiting that long in the cold. I'd go up, touch it, wave at whatever camera Ryan was using, and we'd go home. Ryan said it still counted, that the caretaker wasn't punching a clock. I stuck my phone back in my pocket and stepped onto the path between the first two rows of graves. The snow there was different than on the road, softer, thinner, like it hadn't settled right. My boots didn't sink as much as I expected. They just pressed a shallow mark, and under the snow I could feel the gravel, small stones pushing up through the soles. Outside the fence, it had just been cold air and exhaust from the car. But inside, there was this damp smell. Not strong, just a hint of wet stone and old leaves. Like the kind of basement that never really dries out. We moved forward, slow, and my breath sounded too loud in my own ears. I remember reading names without meaning to as we passed, the way your eyes grab words, and I wish I hadn't. Broken last names, dates from the 1800s, little metal holders for flowers, some empty, some still holding faded bits of plastic that rattled a little in the wind. I didn't feel anything supernatural then. No voices, no cold spots, just the steady awareness that we were walking through a place meant for people who no longer had a choice about being there. And we did. That alone made me feel like we were doing something wrong. The hill slopes gently up from the gate, and near the top, among a cluster of bigger stones, I saw the shape of the angel. Even in the low light, I could make out the wings and the bowed head. Ryan whispered, "There it is," and raised his phone, the little red light from the camera app glowing. I told him to turn the flash off, and he said it was already off. He was just recording the audio and what little video it could catch. We were maybe 20 feet away when I saw the lantern. It wasn't bright, not like a flashlight. It was this soft, warm color. the kind you get from old bulbs or those cheap candles people put in windows. And it was moving down one of the rows to our left, behind a line of tall stones. At first I thought it was a reflection. A car may be passing on the road behind us. But there is no road up there, just the hill, and then the woods. The light bobbed at about chest height, steady, getting a little closer, then stopping, then moving again. I stopped walking. Ryan bumped into me again and hissed for me to keep going until he saw where I was looking. Matt saw it too. For a few seconds we all just stood there, watching that little glow move between the stones. Nobody said anything. My first thought, the one that made sense, was that somebody else was up there. Maybe security, or some drunk guy with a lantern trying to scare us. And honestly, that was scary enough. Getting caught here would be a nightmare to explain. I whispered, "Do you see that?" And Ryan whispered back, "That's not funny. Man, you didn't tell anybody else, did you?" And I said no. The light stopped near a tall rectangular stone and stayed there, steady. That was when I heard the sound. It was faint, just a scratchy, brushing noise, like someone rubbing a stiff brush over rock. Pausing, then rubbing again. That was all, that little, normal sound. And it made my stomach tie up in a knot, because it meant there really was somebody there, close. Someone we hadn't seen walk in. Someone we hadn't heard until just now. I squinted, trying to make out the shape behind the light. For a second I thought I saw a figure. A man, maybe. Hunched a little. Shoulders bent. Wearing something that caught the light in a way that didn't look like modern material. More like heavy cloth. I could make out what might have been a hat or maybe just the top of his head, and the way his arm moved. A slow, repeated motion toward the stone. Then away. I told myself it was just the caretaker story messing with me, that if you see a lantern and you expect a caretaker, your brain fills in the rest. I tried to say that out loud to the others, but my throat felt tight. The brushing noise stopped. The light dipped, like whoever was holding it had lowered their arm. And then it started moving again, sideways, out from behind the tall stone and into a clearer line between two shorter ones. That should have made it easier to see who held it. It didn't. The light moved, steady and smooth, but the shape behind it stayed wrong. It was like my eyes could not lock onto it. I could see something, a suggestion of a shoulder, the top of a head, but whenever I tried to focus on it, my eyes slid to the left or right, to the stones, to the ground. It made me feel a little sick, like motion sickness without moving. Ryan whispered, "Are you getting this?" And his voice was higher than usual, thin. Matt said, "I don't like this. We should go. That's somebody. Man, that's somebody." And I nodded, but my feet didn't move. The lantern turned toward us. The light didn't flare or change. It just angled so that the warm glow was facing down the road toward where we stood near the path, halfway up the hill. It didn't feel like much, not dramatic, but I felt this wave of awareness hit me, like being called on in class when you're not paying attention. Someone knew we were there, someone who had already been up here before us, walking the rows in the dark, doing whatever they had been doing with those stones. I swallowed and managed to say, "Hello," my voice cracking. And then I cleared my throat and tried again, louder, saying we were sorry, we were just leaving, we didn't mean to bother anyone. That is exactly what I said. That we didn't mean to bother anyone. There was no answer. The lantern didn't swing around like in some movie. It just stayed there, steady. Then started moving again. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Ryan took a step back. Matt put a hand on my arm and squeezed hard enough that it hurt. I wanted to run, I swear. I wanted to turn and bolt for the gate. But something about the way that light came down the road toward us held me in place. It wasn't that it was fast. It wasn't. It was slow and steady, the exact pace of someone walking on uneven ground who knows exactly where every dip and stone is without looking. The closer it got, the more wrong everything around it felt. The snow around the stones near the light looked different, like the surface was shifting even when nothing touched it. The headstones seemed to lean just slightly toward that glow, shadows bending, and that brushing sound started again. Faint, but there. Only now it didn't match the movement. It sounded closer than the light looked, like the action and the source had come apart. At maybe 10 feet away from the end of the row, the lantern stopped. The light hung there at the same height, barely swaying. Something in my head told me, if it steps out, if it comes into the open, you will see it, and you won't be able to forget what you see. And I think that thought finally broke whatever was holding Ryan in place, because he let go of my arm and whispered, "Nope, I'm done. I'm done," and turned around and started walking fast back down toward the gate. Matt took a step after him, then looked back at me like he didn't want to leave me alone. I should have gone, I know that. Instead, I took one more step forward, just one, and the snow under my boot made this sharp crunch that sounded way too loud in the quiet. The brushing sound stopped. The light rose a little, like whoever held it had straightened up. And then, without any in-between, the lantern went out. 1 second it was there. The next, it wasn't. There was no flicker, no dimming, no spark. Just dark. My eyes took a second to adjust, and in that second I heard something that still makes my skin crawl when I hear anything close to it. It was the sound of footsteps in snow. Not my own. Not behind me, where Ryan and Matt were, but ahead, between the rows, moving toward me. Slow steps, the kind where the heel presses down first, then the rest of the foot, making that soft, packed crunch. I squinted, trying to see what was making the noise. That was when the clouds shifted and just enough light came through that I saw the footprints. There was a strip of ground between 2 rows of stones leading straight to where I stood. When we had walked up, it had been untouched, just a smooth layer of pale snow. Now, right in front of me, indentations were appearing in it. Not all at once, like a trick, not like some special effect. One at a time, a left footprint forming, pressing down into nothing, then settling, then a right, a little closer, then another left. They were the size of a grown man's steps, not a kid's. Each one pressed the snow down deep enough that I could see the darker ground underneath. Nothing else moved. There was no shape above them, no legs, no coat, nothing. Just the sound of those steps, lined up with the sinking of the snow, coming toward me at the same slow, steady pace the lantern had moved. I couldn't breathe right. My chest felt like someone had set a brick on it. My brain kept trying to say it had to be the wind, or some weird settling, or a trick of the light. But there was no wind, and nothing else was changing, and I could hear the exact crunch I would have made if I had been the one walking. Behind me, Ryan shouted my name, his voice echoing across the stones, but it sounded far away. The next footprint appeared about 6 feet from me. I remember staring at the empty air where the person should have been, at the space above those indentations, and feeling this cold, heavy certainty roll over me. Whatever was walking toward me knew I was there, knew I was watching. Pins and needles, like they do when your circulation gets cut off. And for a second, everything narrowed down to the sound of my own breathing, and the crunch of those steps. Another print, then another, 4 feet away, 3. I whispered, I'm sorry. We shouldn't be here. We're leaving." It came out of me without thinking. The same way you apologize when you bump into somebody in a crowded store. The steps stopped. The last pair of prints were so close that if something had been standing there, I could have reached out and touched its chest. I could see the exact pattern of the tread. The air in front of me felt thick and cold, but that was it. No dramatic shift, no scream, nothing grabbing me. That almost made it worse. Behind me, I heard Matt running, his boots slipping, his breath coming hard. He yelled my name again. closer this time, and that broke whatever trance I was in. I stepped backward, carefully, not wanting to disturb those prints, not wanting to turn my back completely. When I was a few steps away, I forced myself to look up at the angel statue we had come for in the first place. For a second, I thought her head had changed angle, that she was looking straight at me instead of down. But I think that was just my brain, because when I blinked, she was the same as ever. Stone face tilted down, hand extended, dusted with snow. I didn't touch her. I didn't feel brave or stupid enough anymore. I turned then, finally, and walked as fast as I could without running, because something in me said if you run it will follow, without explaining why. The snow felt different under my boots, heavier. When I reached the gate, Ryan grabbed my sleeve and said, "What were you doing, man? What were you doing? We called you like 3 times." His eyes wide and bright in the dim light from the road. I opened my mouth to answer and realized my teeth were chattering too hard to get words out. We stumbled down the steps, the 3 of us. None of us talking now, just moving. And I remember the feeling of the asphalt under my feet when we got back to the road, how weirdly safe it felt, even with the ice. Ryan's cousin rolled the window down and shouted. I didn't say anything. I just went around to the passenger side and reached for the door handle. That was when I saw the note. It was tucked under the passenger side windshield wiper. There hadn't been anything there when we got out of the car. I am sure of that, because I had stood right there and watched my breath fog on the glass for a second before heading up the hill. The paper was stiff with cold when I pulled it out. There were only 3 words written on it, in dark, neat letters that looked almost like the stuff you see in old ledgers or on those cardboard tags people hang in storage rooms. Respect the dead, no punctuation, no name. Just that. I stared at it so long my fingers started to hurt. Ryan came around the car and said, "What is that?" And I showed him. And he laughed. But it was a high, shaky sound. And he swore he hadn't put it there. Matt came and looked and went pale. He checked his own pockets like he expected to find a pad of similar paper and a pen, then shook his head over and over. Ryan's cousin leaned across the driver's seat and grabbed it from me, said, "Seriously, which one of you is trying to be funny?" And when none of us answered, he looked past us up the hill. The gate was closed now. We had left it open. I know we had. I remember the gap, the way the darkness from inside spilled onto the steps. Now the chain was looped back through and hanging, just like before. But the 2 ends were hooked together, not locked, not tied, just hooked in a way that they had not been when we pushed it open. He stared at it for a second, then rolled his window back up and told us to get in the car. Right now. He didn't care whose idea this was. He was not getting a ticket for being up here. The ride back down into town was quiet. The heater clicked and wheezed, trying to catch up, and the radio played some song I've heard 1,000 times and couldn't tell you a single word of from that night. I kept the note in my hand the whole way, folded once, edges digging into my palm. When we dropped Matt off, he hesitated with his hand on the door, then turned back to look at me and said, "You saw something up there, didn't you?" Not asking, just stating it. I couldn't answer. I went home, let myself in as quietly as I could, put my boots by the door, checked on my sister, watched her sleep for a minute like that would anchor me back to something normal, and then went to my room. I sat on the edge of my bed and stared at my phone. Ryan had already sent 3 messages in the group chat, jokes mixed with nervous questions, asking if anyone had messed with the car, if I had set up the note beforehand. I typed no, and then deleted it 4 times before finally sending it. Then I opened the camera app and looked for the video he had recorded. There was only 1 file, less than a minute long. That made no sense, because we had been up there longer than that. But I opened it anyway. The first part was just us walking, snow crunching, our breath loud, Ryan whispering my name, the usual dumb commentary. Then the camera swung up toward the rows, and you could see a smear of light in the distance. The lantern, just a little blur of warmer color, and you could hear us react to it. The hissing whispers, the silence. The image moved a little as his hands shook, and at one point it almost focused on something tall and narrow near the light. But it never got sharp, it just smeared. And then, right when I expected to hear the footsteps, the video cut off. No glitch, no corruption message, just hard stopped. The timestamp said it had been recorded from 11:39 to 11:40. I checked the clock on my phone. It was 12:54. That gap, that missing time, sat in my chest like a stone. I told myself the phone must have stopped recording and Ryan hadn't noticed, that our time on the hill just felt longer than it really was, that we had scared ourselves and stretched it. That was easier to think than the alternative, that there was something my brain wasn't letting me access. I put the note on my nightstand and tried to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those footprints appearing in the snow, one after another, with nothing standing in them. In the morning, I almost convinced myself to throw the note away, to rip it up and flush it or burn it, but something in me wouldn't. It felt like that would be worse, somehow, like tossing away a warning. So I folded it again, very carefully, and stuck it in the back of a drawer under some old school papers. For a couple of days, life pretended to go back to normal. I went to school, sat through classes, nodded along when people talked about homework and college applications, laughed at dumb jokes. Ryan brought up the cemetery a few times between periods, but only to say how lame it had been that nothing really happened, and how he was mad the video was too dark to post anywhere. He never mentioned the note unless we were alone, and even then he did it like he was poking at a sore tooth, quick, and then backing off. Matt went the other way. He started walking a different way home that didn't take him past the hill at all, even though it was longer. And every time we ended up in a conversation about anything close to death, he shut down. He started wearing this little cross necklace I'd never seen on him before. I kept my head down and tried not to think about any of it. That worked until the following week when I was at the diner after school, helping my uncle fix a loose shelf in the back. One of the old guys who comes in every day for coffee was sitting at the counter talking to the waitress about the storm they said might hit the next weekend. And I heard him mention the cemetery on the hill, not the new one, the old one. I froze. He was saying how the plow still did a lazy pass up that road even though nobody went up there much because it was easier than turning around. The waitress, who had moved to town a few years earlier, asked what was even up there besides the cemetery, if anyone still went to put flowers on those graves. Not since the fire. And then, they were supposed to tear the whole thing down after that. But they never did. Typical. Right. My uncle had gone out to the truck for something, so it was just me, the old guy, and the waitress. My heart started pounding again. Before I could overthink it, I stepped up to the edge of the counter and asked, "What fire?" Pretending like I was just making conversation. The old man turned his stool to look at me. Up close, I could see every line on his face, the broken veins on his nose, the slight tremor in his hand as he lifted his mug. He said, "You're Turner's boy." Right. He used to mow out by the highway. And I nodded. And he said, "You really don't know." And I shook my head. So he told me. He told me about the little house that used to stand right by the cemetery fence, just off the road, where the caretaker lived back when the town still used that graveyard. A tiny place, he said. 1 bedroom, little kitchen, sagging porch, built too close to the trees. Said the caretaker had been an odd one. Quiet, kept to himself. Spent more time with the graves than with the living, always walking those rows with a lantern. Even when they put in the electric lights for a while. People in town joked that he would die up there and never notice. Then one winter there was a fire. Some said it started with a bad stove. Some said with a knocked over candle. By the time anyone saw the glow through the trees and got there, the whole house was going. They found what was left of him near the back door, like he'd almost made it out. They shut the cemetery down not long after that. It cost too much to keep the road clear and the place maintained, and nobody liked driving past the ruins of that house anyway. The town talked about tearing the remains down, he said, but they never got around to it. And then nature did most of the job. There's not much left up there now, but some stone and a bit of foundation. As he talked, I remembered how, walking up the hill, I hadn't noticed any other structure besides the stones and the trees. No foundation, no walls, nothing. I swallowed and asked, "Did anybody ever take over his job? You know, looking after the graves?" The old man shook his head. "Not officially," he said. And then he smiled, a thin, humorless twist. "But you hear things. Kids saying they see a light up there at night still. Car windows fogging over when you drive past, like someone breathing on the glass." He chuckled, but there was no warmth in it. "Folks say he's still making his rounds." I pretended to laugh with him, but my hands were sweating. I wanted to ask his name, the caretaker's name, but I didn't. It felt wrong, somehow, like that would be one step too close. That night, I had a dream that didn't feel like a dream. I was back on the hill, standing in front of that row of forming footprints, only this time I could see more detail. The tread marks looked burned into the snow instead of pressed, dark at the edges, and there was a shape above them, a shadow that never quite found its lines. I woke up with the taste of smoke in my mouth. For weeks after that, little things started happening that I kept trying to explain away. The first time was at the garage. I was sweeping up at the end of the day, moving around the lifts and tool chests, and I leaned the broom against the wall by the side door so I could go wash my hands. When I came back, the broom was standing upright in the middle of the floor, bristles resting exactly on a narrow, dark line of dust and oil, like it had been placed there with care. The closest tool chest was a good 10 feet away. There were no wet boot prints, no sign that anyone had gone through while I was gone. I figured my boss was messing with me, but when I asked him, he just gave me a look and said if I had time to play jokes with brooms, I had time to wipe down the counters again. Another time, I was driving home late, alone. My headlights passed the cemetery road, and for a second I saw the gate in the glare, the snow on the steps, the trees behind. Then the dashboard lights blinked off and on again, and my radio cut out. The car kept moving, engine still humming. But for a second, everything else was dead, and in that second, I swear I saw a warm glow between the trees. Up on the hill, too steady and low to be anything from town. By the time the radio flicked back on, it was gone. I told myself it was a glitch. Old cars do that. Wiring gets weird in the cold. The worst was the day I found the dirt. It was about a month after that night. I had tried hard not to think about the cemetery, avoided the hill, swallowed down the memory whenever it pushed up. But I was still waking up in the middle of the night, heart racing, with the sound of footsteps in my ears. One morning, after a particularly bad sleep, I threw back the covers to get up and saw that the floor on my side of the bed was dirty. Not just a little dusty. Dirty. There was a small pattern of dried mud or soil right where my feet usually hit the floor when I get out of bed. Not a big patch, just a few overlapping shapes, roughly the shape and size of footprints, but not as clear. Like someone had stepped there, once or twice, with wet boots, and it had dried. The rest of the floor was clean. I keep my room pretty tidy. My boots were by the door, dry, with no mud around them. I stared at that dirt for a long time. Then I went to my drawer, the one with the note. I hadn't looked at it since I'd put it away. When I opened it, the papers were all in the same place, the notebooks and old drawings, but the note wasn't where I'd left it. Instead of being at the back under everything, it was on top, folded neatly, like someone had lifted it out to read it and then put it back where it would be seen right away. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I knew what it said. Respect the dead. My hands were shaking again. I cleaned the dirt off the floor with a wet cloth, scrubbing until I couldn't see any trace of it, and I told myself I must have tracked it in somehow, half asleep, forgotten about it, that maybe I'd taken my boots off in the night and put them back. It didn't really work, but it got me through the day. That could be my imagination. Fatigue. Stress. A flower arrangement at the nursing home where my mom works falling over, and then somehow standing upright again when no one was in the room. A name on a grave in the new cemetery that I could have sworn I saw up on the hill instead. The sound of a broom on concrete in the garage when I was the only one there, and the broom was already leaning in the corner. None of it big enough to point to and prove. All of it adding up in my head. I turned the radio up and watched the road instead of looking out the side windows. I stopped going to funerals. When a neighbor passed and my mom said we should pay our respects, I said I was sick and stayed home. And I could tell she didn't believe me, but she didn't push. I don't walk past churchyards anymore just because they are on the way. I'll add 10 minutes to my walk instead of cutting past those iron fences. I try not to read names or dates if I can help it. They stick in my mind too easily now. And I don't want any more of them in there. Ryan and I drifted apart after graduation. It wasn't a big fight, just different paths. He went to a community college in another county. We still talk sometimes on social media, but he never brings up that night. And neither do I. Last I heard, Matt moved to a bigger town and is doing something with HVAC. We made that awkward small talk you do when you have history with someone you're not close to anymore. And right when we were about to go our separate ways down the aisle, he said, "Hey, you still think about it, up there?" I wanted to lie. Instead, I said, "Yeah, I do." He nodded like he expected that and said, "Me too, every time it snows," then turned and walked away. 8, right, 8, 8. There was something in the way he kept his eyes off the big window at the front of the store, the one that looks up toward the hill. I don't think any of us came out of that night untouched. Maybe that sounds dramatic, and maybe you're thinking, all this over some footprints and a stupid note. I get that. If you weren't there, if you didn't feel how wrong the air was in that moment, how heavy and sure, it probably sounds small. That's the worst part, honestly. If something huge had happened, if I had been scratched or thrown or whatever people talk about in movies, I could show someone. Instead, I just have this constant, quiet shift inside me. This certainty that there are places and people and jobs that stick around longer than they should, and that sometimes, if you walk into their space without thinking, they notice. They don't have to scream or throw things to make their point. A light where it shouldn't be. A gate that is closed when you know you left it open. Footprints with no one in them. A note in handwriting that doesn't exist anywhere now except that one scrap. That is enough. So here I am. In my car, engine off, battery light steady, parked across from the hill again because I thought maybe if I came back and said this out loud, all of it, into my phone with the screen cracked from where I dropped it on the garage floor, it might loosen something. Like if I told the story right, it would stay here, in the recording, and not in my head. It's almost 3 in the morning. The town is quiet. There's a little bit of snow in the air, tiny flakes that don't stick yet, and from where I am I can just make out the outline of the cemetery fence against the sky. I am not going up there. I am not opening that gate again. I can feel the weight of the note in my jacket pocket, even though it's just paper. I brought it with me tonight for the first time since I found those marks on my floor. I don't know why. Maybe to prove to myself it's still real. Maybe to remind myself why I stay on this side of the road, every few minutes, without meaning to. I look up at the hill and watch for any change in the darkness between the trees. I tell myself there won't be, that whatever we stepped into that night did what it had to do and went back to whatever route it walks. But if I'm honest, the real reason I'm talking into this phone instead of sleeping is simpler than that. I want someone else to know this happened. Not the stories people pass around at school. Not the jokes. Not the campfire version. The real thing. One kid in a gray hoodie with an oil stain. 2 friends trying to act braver than they felt. A gate that should have been locked, a light with no source left to see, steps with nobody in them, and a message on a piece of old paper reminding us we had walked into someone's job site, uninvited. Respect the dead. I used to think that meant flowers and quiet voices and not stepping on the grass. Now I think it means something else too. It means understanding that some people do not quit just because they are gone, that some tasks sink so deep into a person they keep doing them when there is nothing left of them but a route and a routine and a set of footsteps that don't need a body anymore. I don't know if the caretaker up there cares about kids like us personally, or if we were just in the way, like tools left where they shouldn't be. I just know that ever since that night, every time I hear the sound of someone sweeping or brushing stone, even if it's just my boss cleaning up in the garage, this cold runs up my spine, and I have to look over my shoulder to make sure there's nobody standing just outside where I can see. I won't go back through those gates. I won't walk past that fence on foot again. And if you ever find yourself in a town like mine, with a hill like that, and somebody dares you to take a shortcut through the old cemetery or go touch some statue at midnight, you can do what you want. It's your life. But I'm telling you, as plain as I can, from one person who made that choice to someone who hasn't yet, there are some jobs you shouldn't interrupt and some workers you shouldn't surprise. They might just leave you a reminder. Something small you can hold in your hand. Something that shows you they saw you. They registered you. They added you to whatever list they work from. And then you get to spend the rest of your life wondering when, if ever, they will decide you've disrespected the dead again. My name's Travis Holt. I'm from a little place called Naylor Ridge, outside Willow County in rural Arkansas. And I work as a small engine mechanic, riding mowers, chainsaws, all that. My hands smell like gas most days, and I got scars on my knuckles from slipping wrenches. And right now, it is a little after 3 in the morning, and I am sitting out here at the gate of Willow Ridge Cemetery in my old Chevy that barely turns over, talking into this cracked phone like a fool because I cannot take this sitting in my own head anymore. Man, I swear to God, if I do not say it out loud, I'm going to lose it. So just listen. Please. Just let me get through it. Even if nobody ever hears this. I need to tell it like it happened. Start to finish. No fancy stuff, just the day the grave started moving, and the part where I walked out of a cemetery that should not have let me out. That day started so normal it makes me sick to think about it now, because there was nothing special about it. It was just a Wednesday, late season. Cold, but not freezing. That damp bone kind of cold we get around here when the leaves are all down, but the real winter has not settled in yet. And I remember exactly what I ate because I keep replaying it like it matters. 2 pieces of toast with peanut butter and a fried egg. Coffee from the old drip pot that leaves grounds at the bottom of the cup. And I spilled some on my work shirt. The tan one with my name patch sewn on, crooked, and my wife laughed and said I should change, but I just grabbed a damp paper towel and rubbed at it until it was a light stain instead of a dark one, and said nobody cares what I look like at the shop, they just want their weed eater to start. You know. And I kissed her, petted the dog, checked the time on my phone. It was 6:42, and I got in the truck and drove into town like I always do. I clocked in at the shop at 7:58. I remember because the time clock stamped it, and my boss made a joke about me beating the bell for once. And all day, it was just noise and oil and customers who do not know the difference between choke and throttle. Nothing weird. Nothing that felt like anything was off. The only thing on my mind was they finally opened up the late deer season. On that backside of the ridge, and my buddy Mark had set a stand up near the pipeline cut. And I wanted to go check my trail camera and see if anything decent had come through, and I had been putting it off, because by the time I get off work, it is already edging toward dark this time of year. Now where I live, you can get to that stand 2 ways. You can park at the bottom near the creek and hike the long way around. Or you can park up near the old church lot and cut straight across near Willow Ridge Cemetery, follow the little footpath along the fence line and through the scrub into the timber, and everybody uses that path because it saves you 20 minutes easy. Even if you gotta walk by the headstones. And when you grow up around it, you stop thinking about it. The graves are just there, like mailboxes. You know the names. You know where your grandparents are, where the kid from your high school who flipped his truck is, all laid out along the hill. Willow Ridge is not big. It is a small country cemetery on a hill outside town. Gravel road up one side, chained metal gate with paint flaking off, a couple of big old cedar trees, and some newer maples they planted that never really took off, and headstones that lean a little because the ground shifts and nobody has the money to fix them right. The older section up top, newer stones in the lower part near the fence, and on the far side there used to be a little white church with a bell tower, First Willow Baptist, but it burned down in the 80s before I was born. And all that is left now is the old concrete slab, some broken blocks, and a dead patch of grass the county never regraded, plus a sign the church people put up about rebuilding someday, but they never did, so you just have Willow Ridge on one side and an empty foundation on the other, and woods beyond. That is the picture. I closed the register at 5:32, wiped my hands off with those blue paper towels that never really get the grease out, told my boss I was heading to the lease to pull a card and maybe sit a bit if there was any shooting light left, and he said to watch for hogs because they had been rooting up his neighbor's pasture. And I said, yeah, sure, and drove out of town, past the feed store, past the old school, out on County Road 12 until the asphalt turned to gravel and the dust started, the same as I have done 100 times. By the time I got to the church lot, my dash clock said 5:59. The sky was that dull gray that looks like it might rain but never does. Just hangs there heavy, and there was nobody else parked up there. Just my truck, and the rusted sign with the Bible verse on it. And the gate to the cemetery was cracked open like always, just enough you could slip through, because old man Duffy, who takes care of the place, never remembers to lock it right. I grabbed my rifle more out of habit than anything, slung it over my shoulder, put on my faded camo jacket, and started up the little path along the fence. Gravel crunching under my boots, and that was the first time I really noticed anything was off, even though I did not know it yet. The thing is, when you walk by a place enough, you do not pay close attention to details, but your brain still has a picture. Like how the rows of stones line up with the trees, how far the big angel statue sits from the gate, those little things. And as I walked past the first row, I had this quick, stupid thought that the big granite stone with the McAllister name on it looked closer to the fence than usual. Like it had drifted forward a couple of feet, and I actually stopped and frowned and looked at it. And I stood there thinking I must be tired. Maybe I am mixing it up with some other stone, because who says a grave moved? That is crazy. But the feeling stuck to me like a burr. I walked the rest of the way along the fence, past the older part where the stones are all tilting and half sunk, past the little plastic windmills some kid put on their grandpa's grave, rattling a little in the breeze, and I cut through the gap in the brush where the path drops into the timber. And I told myself to quit being weird about it, focus on the trail, listen for anything moving, check the camera, get home before it is full dark. I sat in the stand for maybe an hour, not really hunting, just watching the trees, thinking about bills and Christmas coming up and how the truck had been sounding rough starting up, and I did not see anything worth shooting, just a couple of does moving cautious through the brush. And by the time I climbed down, the woods were already dim, and the temperature had dropped enough I could see my breath when I huffed it out. I checked my phone. It was 7:13, and I decided to take the same shortcut back, which I have done in the dark plenty of times. And I did not even turn my light on at first, because I know that path by feel, the little rise and dip, the way the ground shifts from dirt to gravel when you get close to the fence line again. And I walked up out of the timber humming under my breath to keep my nerves from getting stupid. When I came up on the cemetery again, I flipped on my small flashlight, just a cheap one from the hardware store, and swung it along the fence, And that is when my stomach dropped for the first real time, because I could see the McAllister stone clear as anything, and it was definitely closer to the fence. Maybe by a full row, like one whole grave's space. And the row behind it seemed bunched up, like somebody had taken their hand and pushed the line forward. I stopped and put my hand on the cold metal of the fence because I felt a little dizzy, and I remember saying out loud, just to hear something, "You are tired. Man, that is all. You are just tired." And I swept the light again and counted the stones, 3 with big family names in that row: McAllister, Green, Price, and behind them the smaller, older stones. And they were not where my brain said they should be. I kept trying to explain it. Maybe I never looked that close before. Maybe the ground settled in the rain we had last month. Whatever. And I felt stupid standing there arguing with myself about headstone positions, like I was some kind of surveyor. So I told myself to knock it off and go home. Walking past them felt like walking past people who had turned around to face the fence when you were not watching. That is the best way I can put it, without trying to be fancy. They felt wrong, like they were in the middle of doing something they were not supposed to, and I had walked in on it. I went home, ate reheated chili, watched some junk show on television with my wife, nodded and said the right things when she talked about her day at the school cafeteria, and never told her about the graves, because it sounded stupid in my own head, let alone saying it out loud. I went to bed and dreamed of nothing. I remember just restlessness. Waking up at 3 and staring at the ceiling for no reason. The second time was when I knew I was not just mixing things up. I got off work early because business was slow and the boss did not want to pay everyone to stand around. And Mark texted me a picture from his stand on the other side of the lease. Big buck on the camera just before dawn, and he said I should go check mine again. Maybe they were moving through heavier now, so I figured fine. Same routine. Drove up past the old church slab, parked in the rutted dirt lot, grabbed my gear, walked toward the cemetery fence. It was colder that day, and the air had that wet stone smell, like it does after a heavy dew. And there was a thin layer of cloud that made the light flat. No shadows, everything gray and the same. As soon as I came up over the little rise that gives you the first clear look at the whole cemetery, something twisted in me because it was like stepping into a room where someone had moved all the furniture just enough you knew it instantly but could not say what was wrong. The rows were off, not just one stone this time, but whole lines. The big angel statue I mentioned, the one that used to be halfway up the hill, was now closer to the lane. 3, maybe 4 stones down from where my memory placed it, and the little fenced family plot with the rusted chain was no longer directly under the cedar tree. It was shifted to the right, like the whole thing had been dragged sideways. I stopped so fast, the gravel slipped under my boots. I remember checking for tracks, like a fool, looking for tire marks or some sign heavy machinery had been in there. But the ground was just the same mix of grass and dirt, and old, almost buried stone bases. No fresh scraped patches, no new dirt, nothing. I thought about Old Man Duffy, if maybe he had decided to straighten things or move some stones to keep them from falling. But you cannot just do that without digging. And there was no fresh dig anywhere in sight. I walked along the fence, slower this time. But there were new ones in places my mind said were empty before. And when I got to the lower section, my breath caught because I saw my last name on a stone that I had never seen before. Holt is not the rarest name, but we are not everywhere either. And in this county, there are only a few of us. My folks, my brother's kids, my uncle who moved to Tennessee, and one old cousin buried on the far side in an unmarked grave after a wreck, not here. Yet there it was. A new granite stone, not shiny new, but not weathered yet either. Medium gray, with Holt cut deep across the top in a plain heavy font, and under it only one first name, Daniel, with years that did not match anyone I knew, 1942 to 1998. The dirt in front of it looked settled, not fresh, like the grave had been there a while. But I had walked this fence so many times I could see the old layout in my head, and there was no Holt stone in that row before. I stood there way too long, trying to dig through my memory, wondering if maybe I just never noticed it somehow. But my chest hurt, and I could feel sweat between my shoulder blades even though the air was cold. I reached out and ran my fingers over the letters, and they were rough and real. The little bits of lichen starting at the edges of the carved name. The kind of thing that takes a few seasons to grow. That was the part that made me feel really sick. Because everything about that stone said it had been there more than a year. And I knew it had not. I knew it like I know my own truck. I told myself there had to be some explanation. Maybe they had moved stones from another cemetery. Maybe there was a section I just never looked at. But I knew that was not true, and walking away felt like leaving a question hanging in the air. I forced myself to go into the woods anyway, took the path, did my usual, checked the camera, saw a few does again, and one skinny spike. Nothing worth getting excited about. But I could not focus. Every few minutes I would look back toward where the cemetery was, even though you cannot see it through the trees. And I kept thinking about that stone with my last name and how it sat in a row that had not been there last week. By the time I walked back out, the light was thin and yellow, and the sky was already going darker toward the east. I did not linger near the fence that time. I walked fast, head down, eyes on the ground, gravel crunching loud in my ears. And I got in my truck and left that lot with my tires, spitting stones. And I remember catching sight of the cemetery in my mirror as I turned. Just for a second, and it looked wrong from that angle too, like the whole top half of it had turned to face a different direction. That night I did not sleep much. I laid there next to my wife, listening to her breathe. And every time I closed my eyes, I would see rows sliding sideways in the dark, carving new lines, closing in on the fence. I started to think maybe I should talk to somebody, maybe the groundskeeper, ask if he had done anything. But the thought of how that would sound coming out of my mouth made me feel embarrassed and scared at the same time. "Hey, sir, did you move all the graves a little bit while nobody was looking?" So I kept it to myself. Like a lot of stupid things men keep to themselves. And I went to work and tried to pretend everything was fine. The third time I went out there was not about hunting anymore. That is the part I am not proud of, because I told my wife I was going to help Mark fix a blind. And I told Mark I had to work late. And really, I was just driving out there alone because I needed to see if I had lost my mind or if the world had slipped sideways in that one patch of ground. It was Sunday evening. The kind of dead quiet Sunday you get when folks have already done church and lunch and are inside watching games or napping. The sky had cleared off to a hard, pale blue during the day, but by the time I turned off the main road, the sun was dropping behind the trees, and everything had that stretched out late afternoon look, long shadows, and a faint orange line on the horizon. As I came up on the old church lot, I could feel my hands start to sweat on the steering wheel, and I had to wipe them on my jeans before I got out. The lot was empty again. Nobody around, no other trucks, not even old man Duffy's beat-up little Ford. And the wind was barely there, just enough to make the plastic flowers on the nearer graves twitch a little when I looked through the gate. I left the rifle in the rack this time. Just took my flashlight and my phone, and walked up the gravel lane with my heart beating way too loud in my ears. From the first step into that place, I knew it was different again. You know how there is a memory of a room in your head, where the couch is, where the kitchen table is. And if someone borrowed your key and moved the table 6 inches to the left, you would walk into it and feel something wrong even before you bumped it. That little hitch in your brain. This does not match the picture. That is what it was like, only worse, because it was not just one row. It was everything. The old part that used to be at the top left was more centered now. The newer stones seemed to have crept further down the slope, and the lanes between them, the little paths people walked to visit graves, were at different angles. I stood there and turned slowly, trying to line it up with the view in my mind. And the more I tried, the more the two pictures would not go together. I kept thinking they must have redone the whole place. But how? When? Why? And most of all, how could they do it without leaving bare dirt? Without closing the place for a week? without anybody in town talking about it. I started walking, not along the fence this time, but through the rows, past names I knew and names I did not. And the air felt heavier the deeper I went, like a storm was coming, even though the sky was clear. The smell of cut grass and old flowers and damp stone was stronger than it should have been. It picked up this metallic tang that made the back of my throat feel tight. My boots made that dull crunch on the gravel and dead leaves, and every sound seemed close, like the trees around the cemetery had leaned in. I told myself over and over, "You are just worked up. You are looking for things now. Of course, it seems different. You have psyched yourself out. Calm down." But every corner I turned made it worse. When I reached the lower section where I had seen that Holt stone before, I felt my chest tighten again, because the stone was still there, but it was not in the same place anymore. It had moved closer to the middle. I know how that sounds, but that is what I saw. Before it had been near the edge of the row, 3 or 4 stones from the fence, and now it was smack in the center of the line, with 2 stones on each side of it, like everything had bunched up to make room. The dirt in front of it was still settled, still not fresh, still no sign of anybody digging. The grass grown over in a patchy way like it had been mowed a few times. I stepped up to it, slowly, and my knees felt weak. The top still said Holt, same rough carved letters. But the first name was not Daniel anymore. It was my first name, Travis. The years below it were not filled in, just my birth year carved and a dash after it with nothing on the other side. I reached out my hand and pulled it back twice before I finally touched it, because part of me was sure if I laid a finger on that stone it would be cold in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. It was just stone, hard, cold, real, under my skin, my own name, my own year. An empty space, waiting after the dash. I swallowed so hard it hurt. I whispered that this was some kind of trick, somebody messing with me, and I looked around for a camera, for someone hiding behind one of the monuments, laughing, but there was nobody. The whole cemetery was empty, not even a car on the road, no birds, no wind strong enough to make a sound in the trees, just that still thick air and my own breathing getting faster. Listen, dude, I know how this sounds. I know I sound like someone who is getting sick in the head, but you have to understand how wrong that felt. That stone was not there a week ago. It was not there 3 days ago. And now it was sitting there with my own name on it like it had been waiting. I backed away, eyes on the stone, and I stepped on something that rolled under my boot. It was a little vase, one of those cheap metal ones people stick plastic flowers in. Only it was empty, lying on its side. I picked it up and looked around for a grave it might have come from. But every stone nearby had its own vase or flowers already. It did not belong to any of them. I set it upright next to my stone. I mean the stone with my name. And for some reason, that little act made me feel worse. Like I had just tidied my own future place. That was when I decided to leave, right then. No more wandering, no more checking, just go back to the truck and get out. I turned toward where the gate should have been, up the slight rise to the right, and started walking, fast. I had gone maybe 20 steps when something in my brain nagged at me and I stopped and looked around. The gate was not there. I was standing in front of a different row, one with older stones, some of them almost worn blank, and the big angel statue was off to my left now when it should have been behind me. I thought I had just turned wrong, so I turned again, aimed myself at where the cedars flanked the entrance, and walked. After a minute of crunching gravel, I passed the same Holt stone again. My legs went weak. I stared at it and felt my throat close. I had not turned in a circle. I had walked straight, or as straight as a person can while weaving through gravestones. But I had the sense of going in one direction the whole time. And yet here it was again. The same stone, the same little vase next to it. I told myself I had gotten turned around, that I must have looped without realizing it. So I picked a different landmark, the big angel, and aimed for the opposite side from it where I knew the fence ran, and I walked that way. Counting my steps, 30, 40, 50. my boots sliding a little on loose gravel. And when I stopped, I was looking at the Holtstone again, just from a different angle. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs. My vision went sharp around the edges, like everything was too clear. The plastic flowers on the nearby graves rattled a little, and I realized my hands were shaking so badly I was making them move when I brushed past. I am telling you, man, it was like the cemetery was folding in on itself, like it had turned into a maze without walls, just rows that would not line up the right way. The more I tried to walk out, the more I ended up back in front of that same stone. 3 times I did it. I tried to follow the fence, but it would not stay where it should be. I would walk along it until it curved the wrong way and brought me back to the middle instead of the gate. I tried walking directly uphill because the entrance is at the top, but the ground seemed to slope different under my feet, and every time the path would bend between stones and spit me out near that marker with my name. I started talking out loud, just babbling, saying this is not funny. Whatever this is, stop. I get it. You got me. And my voice sounded small and thin in that big open space. The sky had gone dimmer while I was walking, the light draining faster than it should have, like the day was running out of time all at once. My phone said it was only 5:23, but it looked like 6:30 or later. The trees where the woods started beyond the cemetery looked darker, like a solid wall instead of separate trunks. At one point I thought I saw someone standing near the old section, just a shape, but when I turned fully there was nothing, just stones and the twisted branches of a bare oak. I did not call out to whoever it might have been. I did not want an answer. After the 3rd time I ended up back at my own name, I dropped to my knees without meaning to. The air knocked out of me, and I grabbed the edge of the stone and shook it hard because some stupid part of me thought if I could make it move it would prove this was just in my head. But it did not budge, not even a little. It was set deep and solid. I stayed there on my knees with the cold seeping through my jeans, trying not to cry, trying to breathe slow, telling myself there had to be some reason. Maybe I was having a panic attack, maybe I was getting sick. Anything that was about me and not about the ground under me changing shape. That was when I heard the bells. At first, it was just a faint sound under the wind, a tiny metallic ring like a spoon hitting a glass way far off. I thought it was in my head. Maybe some noise from a house I could not see. But then it came again, clearer. 2 notes, then a 3rd, deep and slow, the unmistakable sound of a church bell being pulled by a rope in a tower. Only there is no church there anymore. The old Willow Baptist burned down before I was born. Everyone in town knows that. They tell the story about the lightning storm and the faulty wiring. How the bell cracked and fell when the roof gave in. How the whole place was knocked down except the slab. And nobody ever put a new one up. I know that. And still, the bells were ringing. Somewhere past the cemetery, beyond the trees. Steady and slow. Like someone was calling people in for an evening service. I remember saying no out loud, just that one word, over and over a few times. No, no, no. Like I could refuse the sound itself, but it kept going, and the more I listened, the more I realized it was not echoing right. The sound did not spread like normal. It felt like it was coming from one direction only, a straight line of noise. And for some reason that made me think that if I followed it, I could get out. I do not know why. It was just a feeling. The same way you know which way your own house is when you are driving back at night even before you see the porch light. So I stood up, legs shaking, and turned toward where the bells sounded loudest, which was not where the church used to sit. Not exactly. It was a little off to the side, toward the part of the fence that drops down to the lower ditch. I did not try to line it up with the gate anymore. I did not look for rows that made sense. I just locked onto that sound and started walking toward it. Between stones, stepping over low markers, brushing past dead bouquets and little flags that barely moved in the dead air. The bells kept going, slow and steady, and every time the sound swelled, I adjusted my path a little, like following a signal. I did not look back at my own stone, though I could feel it behind me, like a pair of eyes between my shoulder blades. At one point, my boot toe caught on something and I almost fell. And when I glanced down, I saw I had clipped the edge of a metal plate set low in the ground, one of those flat markers for someone who could not afford a standing stone. And I muttered, "Sorry," without thinking, like I had stepped on somebody's foot. The bells got louder as I went, but the church slab never appeared. There was just more cemetery, more rows, some I did not recognize at all. Names from families I had never heard of in this county. For a second, I wondered if I had wandered into some older section I had never seen, but that made no sense either. I had seen the whole place from the road countless times. Finally, after what felt like way longer than it could have been, the ground under my boots changed from the soft give of graveyard grass to the firm crunch of crushed stone, and my shoulder brushed something cold and rough that was not a marker. I looked over and realized my hand was on the post of the main gate. I was standing outside the cemetery, half in the ditch, the chain hanging loose in front of me, like it had always been that way. The bells stopped in the same second I noticed where I was. It was like someone had cut a wire. 1 second they were there, loud and close enough that I felt them in my teeth. The next, there was only the faint rustle of dry leaves and the far-off hum of somebody's truck on the highway. I turned around and looked back through the bars of the gate. The cemetery looked normal. I do not know how else to say it. From that angle, in that light, it looked exactly like it did all those other evenings I had driven by. Rows neat enough, angel up on the rise, old part in one corner, new stones in the other, nothing out of place that I could see. I stood there, staring, trying to find the Holt stone from where I was. But from outside the fence, you can only see the taller markers. And mine, or that one with my name, is not that big. All I could see were familiar shapes, the same ones I grew up driving past. And the longer I looked, the more I started to feel like maybe the whole thing inside had been some kind of spell or dream, something that snapped the moment I crossed the line out. Only I had dirt on my knees and a scrape on my hand, and my chest hurt from breathing so hard, and the air outside the fence felt different against my face, lighter, like it had more room in it. I did not go back in. I backed away from the gate like it was an animal that might lunge, turned, and almost ran to my truck. I fumbled the keys twice, dropped them in the gravel, cursed under my breath, even though I am trying not to use that kind of language much, and finally got the door open and climbed in. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. When the engine caught, I almost cried from relief. I wanted to go home, to drive straight there and walk in and act normal and never tell anyone, but I only made it as far as the stop sign before I had to pull over because I could not get my breathing under control. I sat there with my forehead against the steering wheel, the engine idling rough, and watched the sky get darker through the windshield while my mind replayed every step in there like a bad tape. That should have been the end of it. It would have been bad enough if it was, but here is the part that will not let me rest. The part that keeps me parked out here now, talking into this stupid phone. 3 days later, I made myself go back in the daylight. I told myself if I could walk through in full sun and see everything where it ought to be, that stone gone or changed back, the rows straight, I could chalk the whole thing up to some kind of breakdown, promise myself to get checked out, and move on. My wife thought I was at the shop. My boss thought I had the day off to get some errands done. Really, I was driving out toward Willow Ridge with my stomach in a knot so tight I had to pull over once and sit with the door open, breathing cool air, before I kept going. The day was bright and cold, no clouds, the kind of clear blue sky that makes every edge sharp. And there were 2 cars parked in the church lot when I pulled up, both older sedans, and I almost turned around when I saw them. People in the cemetery, I thought, a funeral maybe, or somebody visiting. And the idea of walking in there with other people around made me feel exposed, like whatever had happened to me could spread. But then a woman came out of the gate, holding the arm of an older man in a cap, moving slow, and they walked to one of the cars and drove away, leaving the place quiet again. I sat there with the engine off for a full 5 minutes, watching the empty road. Before I got out, the gate was open wide this time, chain wrapped around the post but not hooked, and there were fresh tracks in the gravel from the cars. That comforted me a little. It felt normal, like a regular day in a regular cemetery. I walked in, hands shoved in my jacket pockets so nobody would see them shaking, though there was nobody to see. From the first few steps it looked fine. The rows lined up, the little fenced family plot was back under the cedar tree where I remembered it. The big angel was standing where it belonged. I even recognized the arrangement of flowers on some of the nearer graves from drives past in the last week. My shoulders loosened a little. I thought, maybe it really was just me. Maybe I walked when I should have, turned and panicked, and looped without realizing it. Maybe I misread a name in bad light. The thought that I might be the problem was, for a moment, actually a relief compared to the idea that the ground itself had been sliding around under me. I walked straight toward the section where the Holtstone should have been. Steps counted, landmarks checked. Everything was where memory said it should be. Each name in its place. Except one. The Holtstone was still there. It was in the right spot for that row, no longer moved around, just where a stone ought to be. But it was not the old Daniel one, and it was not gone. It was the same one I saw that evening. My last name on top, my first name under it, my birth year and the little dash with nothing after it. Only now it did not look like it had grown there overnight. It looked like it had been there a long time. Someone had put fresh flowers in front of it, a small bunch of white fake lilies with a blue ribbon. The ground in front of it had the worn, smooth look of a place where people have stood often, feet scuffing the grass. The stone itself had the beginning of a dark streak down one side like rain had been running over it for seasons. I reached out and touched the carved letters again and felt the same rough edges, but there were tiny bits of dirt in the grooves now, like they had been gathering there for months. I stepped back and looked around, waiting for someone to come out from behind a tree and tell me this was some kind of joke, that they had been planning it for ages, watching my face, but there was nobody. Only the quiet and the faint sound of a truck changing gears way off on the highway. After a while, my knees started to feel weak again, so I sat down on the low concrete border of the grave next to mine, or what I guess is mine now. I do not know what to call it, and I sat there and watched that stone like it might move if I blinked. It did not. It just stayed there, long enough that my legs went numb and my fingers got stiff from the cold. At some point I realized I was talking under my breath, saying little things like, "I am not supposed to be here, and I am still alive, and this is wrong," and nobody answered, of course. Eventually I stood up, walked back to the gate, and left. Nobody stopped me. The cemetery did not twist itself into a maze that time. The path to the gate stayed where it belonged. The bells did not ring, but something did not come back out with me. That is the only way I can explain it. Something stayed behind, attached to that name carved in stone. Since that day, I cannot pass any cemetery without feeling my chest tighten. Not just Willow Ridge, any of them. Even driving through town, past that little plot by the highway with the white fence, I feel my hands grip the wheel tighter and my eyes lock straight ahead. If I see headstones out of the corner of my eye, my throat closes and I have to turn the radio up to drown out a sound that is not there yet but feels like it might start. Hidden bells or something worse. I have changed my routes to work and home to avoid driving past Willow Ridge. It adds 15 minutes some days, and my wife asked why, and I told her something about road work. And she believed me, because why would she think I am lying about something like that? I stopped going out to that stand. I told Mark someone had been trespassing, and I did not feel safe hunting there. Which is half true, only the trespasser is whatever moved that stone into my life. I dream about rows of graves that rearrange when I blink. In the dreams, I am always standing in front of that same stone, and the date after the dash keeps flickering, changing to tomorrow, next week, and then back to blank again. I wake up with my heart pounding, and the sound of bells fading out of my ears, like I have just walked out of someplace I should not have been. That is why I am out here now, parked by the gate in the middle of the night with the engine off so I do not run the battery down, watching the outline of the fence against the sky. I thought maybe if I sat here long enough and told it all, said every part of it into this phone, it would lose some of its grip. Maybe the cemetery would just be a piece of land again with stones in it, instead of something that can bend around a person and keep them circling their own name. But sitting here, I can see a little glint of stone when the moon slips out from behind a cloud, just a hint of it through the bars. And I know one of those shapes is mine, waiting, settled in, like it has been there longer than I have been walking around above ground. I do not go inside anymore. I do not step past any fence that has headstones behind it. I will drive the long way. I will be late to work. I will look like a fool making wide loops around churchyards. I do not care. I cannot walk where the dead are lined up, because I know now it might not be them waiting. It might be the ground itself, patient and willing to slide a little to meet me. People will tell you cemeteries are peaceful, that the dead do not bother anybody, that it is just a place for remembering. Maybe that is true most places, but here in Willow County, out at Willow Ridge, I know for a fact the graves move. When you are not watching, the rows shift, the paths bend, to bring you back to where they want you. And there is a stone out there with my full name on it, and a date that is not filled in yet. And every time a bell rings on a television or in some far-off church service, my hands sweat, because I am afraid, if I listen too close, it will not be coming from there at all. It will be coming from up on that hill, calling me back to finish whatever started the night I tried to walk out and almost did not. So that is it. That is what happened. I swear to God I am telling it like it was. No dressing it up, no making it pretty. I am still alive. I still eat toast and spill coffee and kiss my wife in the mornings. But I will not walk past cemeteries anymore. I will not even look at them if I can help it. And if you ever find yourself cutting across some graveyard to save time, thinking you know every row and every stone, I am begging you, check the names. Just once. Real careful. If you see your own, turn around before the ground decides you belong there more than you belong anywhere else. The Crying Woman of Redgate Cemetery. My name's Daniel Mercer. I'm from Redgate, Illinois, out past the old highway where the cornfields start swallowing the houses, and I work as a mechanic at a little 3-bay shop that smells like oil and burnt coffee. I am saying that so you know I am real, and I am tired, and my hands hurt most days. And that night was just supposed to be another long one, where I went home, ate something cheap, and zoned out in front of the TV until I fell asleep in my work clothes. I remember exactly what I ate that day. Ham sandwich from the gas station cooler, the kind that comes in that plastic triangle and tastes like salt and refrigerator. I remember because the bread was kind of soggy and I thought about going back to complain, and then I didn't. Because who has the energy to argue about bread when you have 12 oil changes booked and 1 transmission pull? I had on my gray work shirt with the red patch that says Dan in crooked letters because the stitching is a little off. And there was a smear of black grease on the left side that I kept meaning to wash out, and then my life that I'm at. But every day there is a new stain. So what is the point? I clocked out at exactly 5:32. I checked my phone when I swiped my card because I was thinking about whether I had time to stop at the grocery store before it got too dark. It was early fall. That kind of cold where the air feels thin and your fingers crack if you do not keep lotion in your truck. I remember thinking the sky looked like it was holding back a storm. Not a big one, just that heavy, low gray that sits right on top of the water tower and makes everything feel closer. I was planning on going home, heating up leftover chili, maybe falling asleep in the chair with the TV on some show I have seen 100 times. Then my phone buzzed before I even got out of the parking lot. It was Caleb. He is one of those guys who runs a paranormal channel online. You know the type. Grainy videos. Lots of talking about cold spots and orbs. Cheap jump scares that still get 1 million views because people like being scared as long as it is someone else's problem. Caleb works at the grocery store during the day, stocks shelves and runs the register, but at night he is all about ghosts. He had been on me for months to come out with him on one of his shoots because he wanted a second camera, and he said I had a steady hand and a good sense of when people were lying. I kept telling him no because, honestly, I thought it was all a joke, and also because the idea of hanging around empty houses and graveyards after midnight did not sound fun. But that night, I don't know, man, maybe I was tired. Maybe I just did not want to go back to my empty trailer and listen to the fridge make that buzzing sound. Red Gate tonight, need you, big one. And then another message. Serious stuff, man, like old stories, crying woman, cemetery, locals freaked. I stared at the screen for a while in the cab of my truck with the engine idling and the radio low, and I thought, if I say yes once, he will leave me alone after. One time, just to shut him up, I called instead of texting because I did not want to type back and forth. He picked up on the first ring, talking fast like he always does. He said he had gotten 3 messages in 1 week about the same thing, all from different people who did not know each other, all saying they heard a woman crying out at Redgate Cemetery late at night, down by the collapsed mausoleum on the far side. Said she was asking about a kid, said she sounded close even when nobody could see her. The thing is, everybody in town knows Redgate. It is not big. Couple hundred graves, tops, chain link fence with red paint flaking off, big iron gate that squeaks even on still days. You can see it from the road when you drive past, but most folks just kind of look away or turn the radio up right then. Kids hop the fence on dares sometimes, leave beer cans and cigarette butts between the older stones. But they leave that far corner alone, the part down by the trees, where the ground sinks a little and the old family mausoleum broke in on itself years back. It is just a pile of stone now, half sunk, door twisted off to the side like someone tried to drag it away and gave up. My uncle used to tell us when we were kids that is where the bad ones got buried. The people you did not talk about. But that was just something adults say to keep kids from messing around. At least that is what I always thought. Caleb kept talking, saying stuff like, I swear to God, this is the real deal. Dan, this is the one that is going to blow up. I need another angle. I need someone who is not just there for clicks. He said he had already cleared it with the groundskeeper to be there late because he told him he was doing a history piece, not ghost hunting, which sounded like him. He lies easy when he thinks it is for a good cause. I should have said no. I keep running that part over in my head, trying to find the version where I say no, where I go home and microwave my leftovers and wake up the next morning tired, but still the same person. Instead, I said, "What time?" And he laughed like he knew I would give in eventually. We agreed to meet at the cemetery gate at 9. I went home. I changed my shirt because the grease stain bothered me, which is funny now because that shirt is gone and I still see it in my head like it is hanging on the back of the chair. I made the chili, ate half of it while standing at the sink, staring out the little window that faces the road. Every car that passed, I wondered if it was Caleb deciding to head out early. I checked my phone every 20 minutes, watched the clock crawl. By the time I grabbed my jacket and keys, my stomach hurt from the chili and nerves mixed together. The sun was already gone by 8:30. That time of year it drops fast. 1 minute it is light enough to see the silos in the distance. The next it is like someone turned the world down a few clicks. I drove the same road I drive every day. Past the feed store, past the closed diner with the faded sign, past the little church with the peeling white paint. When I turned the corner and the cemetery came into view, my chest got tight in a way I did not expect. From the road, Red Gate looked small, just rows of stones, some newer, some leaning. The gate really is red, or it was once. Now it is mostly rust, but the name stuck. There is a single streetlight across the road that sort of lights the entrance, but not much past it. The rest is just black shapes against darker sky. Caleb was already there, leaning against his car with the trunk open. He had 2 cameras, a tripod, a couple of those little lights on stands, cryptocrawler in dripping letters that glow faint in the dark. He grinned when he saw me. like this was a regular hangout and not a bad decision. "Man, I knew you would show," he said. "Told you this one felt different." I told him I was only there this one time, that I was not joining his crew or whatever, and he said, yeah, sure. Just help me get some clean audio and backup video, and then you can go home and tell everyone you were there when it happened." He handed me the second camera, showed me how to start and stop recording, told me to just keep moving slow, no big jerks. Try to follow him, but also get wide shots. The gate was locked, big chain through the bars, padlock hanging. That is normal. The town put it in after too many kids were sneaking in. Caleb pulled a key from his pocket that I did not ask about, and he said, "Groundskeeper, man, told you, it is all good." He unlocked the gate, pushed it open, and it made that long metal scraping sound that everyone knows. I stepped inside, and it felt like crossing a line that was not supposed to be crossed. The air was colder on that side. I know how that sounds, but it was. It smelled like wet dirt and plastic flowers, and something old, like a basement that never quite dries out. We walked up the main path, gravel crunching under our boots. I kept my eyes on the ground at first, because looking straight at the stones felt rude, like walking into someone's house without knocking. Caleb talked to the camera, did his intro in that lower voice he uses when he wants to sound serious. He said the name of the cemetery, the town, the legend, how people for years had talked about a woman out here you could hear but not see, how in the last week the reports had gotten more specific. Soft crying from the far corner, a voice asking the same question, over and over. "Have you seen my boy?" He said it into the lens, and it sent a shiver up my arms that I pretended was from the wind. We did a slow walk through the rows first, him with his main camera, me trailing to the side with mine, picking up side angles. I watched the little screen instead of the real world because it felt safer somehow, like the glass was a shield. We passed stones with names I recognized from town, old teachers, guys whose cars I had worked on, a kid who died in a wreck 2 winters back. I did not let myself read the dates. The further back we went, the older the stones got. The ground turned uneven, with dips where the soil had settled. It was darker there. The streetlight only a faint glow behind us, the sky a low ceiling. In the distance, I could see the outline of the collapsed mausoleum, a hunched shape against the tree line. You could not see much detail in the dark, just the broken roof and the twisted door. That is when I heard it the first time. I thought it was the wind at first because it was that same low, drawn-out sound, but then it caught in the middle like someone trying not to breathe too loud. I stopped walking without meaning to. Caleb kept going a few steps, still talking to the camera, and then he looked back at me and frowned. "You good, man," he said. "You look like you saw something." I did not want to say I thought I heard crying, because that sounded like playing into his whole thing. So I just said, "Did you hear that?" And he went quiet. We both stood there, cameras in our hands, the little red lights blinking. The cemetery was not silent. It never is. There was the buzz of the streetlight behind us, distant hum of a truck on the highway, some leaf rustling from the trees. But under that, there was this other sound. A kind of hitching breath, spaced out like someone trying to keep it together and failing. Near the mausoleum. Caleb's eyes lit up, and I hated that. He mouthed something like, "You hear that, right?" And I nodded, because pretending not to would not make it stop. He turned his main camera toward the sound, lowered his voice even more, said into the mic, "We are hearing what sounds like crying, coming from the far corner of the cemetery, near the collapsed family tomb. No one else is here. We checked the gate. We checked the road." He motioned for me to swing wide to the left to get a different angle. I did it because my brain was still in that place where you follow instructions from the loudest person near you. With every step, the sound got clearer. It was a woman. You could tell from the pitch. Not wailing, not screaming, just these broken little breaths that kept catching in her throat. If you have ever heard someone cry like they do not want anyone to hear them, you know what I mean. We rounded the last row of stones before the tree line, and that is when I saw her. She was kneeling in front of a grave maybe 20 yards ahead, near what was left of the mausoleum wall. She was wearing something light, maybe a dress or a long coat. I could not tell in the dark, and her hair was hanging down, hiding her face. Her shoulders were moving with the crying. Not big movements, just that little shake people do when they are trying to hold it in. For a second, my brain went to normal explanations. Maybe someone lost somebody recently, and they came out here late, so no one would see them. Maybe the groundskeeper let them in. Maybe we should not be filming this. I felt this hot flush of shame, like I had walked into a bathroom when someone thought they were alone. I lowered my camera without thinking. Caleb did not. He whispered, "Oh man, we got a live one," under his breath, then cleared his throat and said, "Hey, ma'am," kind of gentle, like he was talking to a skittish animal. She did not react. The crying did not change. He took a slow step closer. Camera up, and tried again. "Ma'am, I am sorry. We did not mean to bother you. We are just filming a little documentary thing. We can go if you want. Kramer Parliament of either Parliament, and Friends de Feither in the Vateroser. In the base Kramer Parliament of either." The crying stopped like someone hit a switch. No tapering off, no sniffles, just stopped. Her shoulders went still. Caleb froze mid-step. I remember the exact way his shoe pressed into the soft ground, like it was sinking. The air went heavy, like right before a storm when you feel the pressure in your ears. She did not stand up. She did not turn around. The only thing that moved was her head, tilting slightly to one side like she was listening to something behind her. I realized I was holding my breath. Without looking at us, without any sound of her shifting her weight or fabric rustling, she spoke. The voice was soft but clear, like she was standing next to me instead of ahead. "Have you seen my boy?" That is exactly how she said it. Not, "Have you seen my son?" Not, "Where is my child?" "Have you seen my boy?" There was something wrong about the way the words sat together. Caleb glanced back at me, and his face had that look I have only seen on a couple people. The look where the part of them that likes scary stories just falls away, and what is left is the animal part that wants to run. I shook my head because I did not know what else to do. I did not say anything because some part of me was sure that answering her, even with a simple no, would be stepping off a cliff. She said it again. Same tone, same exact rhythm. "Have you seen my boy?" I remember thinking, who talks like that? Not who is she? Not what is happening? Just that stupid little phrase looping in my head. Caleb cleared his throat, and his voice came out thinner than before. "Ma'am," he said, "we do not want any trouble. We can leave. We did not know anyone would be here." Still kneeling, still not turning around, she said, "He was just here." And this time, there was a little crack in the middle of the sentence, like a record catching. He was just here. The thing that got me was there was no breath between the words. Talk to anyone. Listen close. They breathe around their sentences. She did not. It was all one smooth piece of sound, like it had been recorded and played back. Caleb took another step closer, and I whispered, "Dude, stop," without even realizing I was going to say it. He ignored me, because that is what he does, and raised his free hand a little, like he was approaching a dog he did not want to spook. I could see the screen of his camera glowing, the little rectangle of her back, the top of the stone in front of her. I lifted my camera again because my hands did it on their own, but I was not really looking through it anymore. I was watching with my eyes, and with my eyes I could see that something was off about how she fit into the dark. The light from our little stand lamps did not quite land on her right, Everything else had that normal flashlight look. Bright on one side, shadow on the other. On her, the edges were too clean, like someone had cut her out and pasted her in. My scalp started to tingle, this tight, prickling feeling. Caleb stopped a few feet behind her. He said, "Ma'am, who are you looking for? Maybe we can help you find someone." I could hear his teeth clicking a little. For a second, there was nothing, just that heavy air and the distant sound of a truck on the highway. Then she started to stand up. Not a normal stand. Not the way people push off with their hands or rock forward. One moment she was kneeling, the next she was vertical, like a jump cut, like a skipped frame. There was no in-between motion. My brain tried to fill it in and could not. She was still facing the grave, back to us. Her head tilted a little more to the side, too far, like there was no bone to stop it. "Have you seen my boy?" she asked again. And now it sounded like the question was coming from behind me and in front of me at the same time. I flinched and turned my head even though I knew she was right there. The stones behind us were just stones. No one there. When I looked back, she was no longer in front of the grave. She was behind the next stone over, like she had stepped sideways without crossing the space between. Caleb jerked, nearly dropped his camera. I heard him say, "No, no," under his breath, not like a curse, just like someone trying to reject what is right in front of them. I felt this buzzing in my teeth, like when you bite down on a piece of foil. I wanted to run. Every part of me wanted to turn and bolt back to the gate. But my feet did not move. My feet felt like they belonged to someone else. She moved again, always staying on the far side of the headstones, never turning, just appearing, one stone over, then another, closer, in this sideways pattern, always with that little tilt to her head like she was listening to something only she could hear. The crying never came back. She did not make any sound except that same question. "Have you seen my boy?" Every time she said it, it was exactly the same, like someone playing the same audio clip. No variation, no tiredness, no breath. Caleb was shaking now. I could see the vibration in the light from his camera, the way the image bounced. "Stop," I said, louder this time. "We need to go, Caleb. We need to go now." He did not move until she reached the stone 3 rows over, and then something in him snapped. He stepped backward, still facing her, and his heel caught on a little sunken patch of ground. He went over hard, landing on his back with this loud, ugly sound as the air shot out of him. His camera flew out of his hand, hit the grass, skidded. The light it was attached to spun, throwing crazy shadows. For a second, I lost sight of her in the chaos. I ran to Caleb, reached down without taking my eyes off the space where she had been. "You good, man?" I asked, and my voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well. He nodded, gasping, eyes huge. "Grab the camera," he wheezed, and I almost laughed because it was so like him even then. Saw that the little red light was still on. When I looked back toward the graves, everything was empty. No woman, no movement, just stones and the dark shape of the broken mausoleum and the trees behind it. The air felt lighter by a fraction, like someone had opened a window. I tried to tell myself she had run, that while we were focused on Caleb falling, she had gotten up and taken off toward the trees. But there had been no footstep sounds, no rustle of clothes, no change in the air. She was just gone. Caleb struggled to his feet, clutching his chest. He said, "Did you get that? Tell me you got that." And I wanted to grab him by the hoodie and shake him. Instead, I just said, "We are leaving. Right now." I am not asking. He must have heard something in my voice because he did not argue. We grabbed the lights, barely folded the tripod, left one of the little mic stands lying in the grass. The whole time, I felt like we were walking against a current, like the space between us and the gate had stretched out. The rows of stones felt closer together, the path narrower, At one point, I looked down and realized I was stepping exactly in my own footprints from when we walked in, my boot prints lining up so perfectly, it made my stomach drop. When we reached the main path, I heard her again, behind us this time, way too close. "Have you seen my boy?" It sounded like she was right at my shoulder, whispering the words into my ear. I did not turn around. Caleb did. I heard him gasp this tiny, strangled sound, and I grabbed the back of his hoodie and yanked him forward so hard he almost fell again. "Do not look," I said. And I do not know why I said it, but it felt important in a way nothing else had felt important that night. Do not look back. We half ran, half stumbled to the gate. The chain was still hanging in the same sloppy loop. The padlock was still there. For a second, my hands would not work right on the metal. My fingers felt thick, numb. Caleb shoved his hand past mine, fumbled with the key, got it open. We pushed through and slammed the gate behind us. The streetlight buzzing overhead sounded like a roar. We did not stop moving until we were at the cars. I leaned on the hood of my truck, tried to breathe right. My heart was doing this stuttering thing, like it would race, then pause, then slam hard once. Caleb paced in a little circle beside his car, hands on top of his head, hoodie riding up to show a strip of his back. After a while, he stopped and looked at me. His face was pale under the patchy beard, eyes bright in a way I did not like. "You saw her, right?" he said. "Tell me you saw her." I wanted so badly to say no, to chalk it up to his imagination and my nerves and some trick of the light. But I had seen her. I had heard that same question drilled into the cold air. I saw her. Said something about texting later, and drove off in opposite directions. I thought maybe that would be it. A weird night I could stuff into a corner of my mind and try not to touch. But this is the part that will not leave me alone. When I got home, I did not turn on any lights except the kitchen one over the sink. I kept thinking I heard someone crying outside, but when I muted the TV, there was nothing. I told myself it was the pipes, or the wind, or the neighbor's dog. My phone buzzed around midnight. It was Caleb again. He said he had loaded the footage onto his computer to start going through it, and he wanted me to see something. I did not want to drive back to his place that late, so he said he would send a clip. A couple minutes later, a file came through. It was from his main camera, pointed at the grave where she had first been kneeling. The image was grainy, but clear enough. The tombstones, the twisted shape of the broken mausoleum door in the background, the edge of the trees. No woman, no figure, just empty space. But the audio was there, clear as anything. That soft crying, catching in the middle, that voice saying, "Have you seen my boy?" Over and over in the same tone, the same spacing, like a recording looped. He sent another clip. This one from the moment he fell. The camera had gone sideways, shot of the grass and a tilted view of the stones. By then, my hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the phone. I texted him. "Maybe your mic picked up something from a house nearby. Maybe someone left a radio on. Something like that." He replied right away. "Nobody lives that close, man. You know that." And the crying started before we got near the fence. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I put it face down on the table and tried to focus on the TV. I did not sleep much, just drifted for a few minutes here and there, jerking awake every time I thought I heard that voice again. The next morning, I almost convinced myself to go on like normal. I put on my work shirt, the gray one with the red patch, made coffee that tasted like burnt rubber, drove to the shop. I did an oil change, rotated some tires, argued with a guy about his brakes. I tried to ignore it, but he kept texting. "Dude, I am serious. This is messed up. It will not send right." I finally told my boss I was feeling sick and needed to go home. He gave me a look like he did not believe me, but he let me clock out. I drove straight to Caleb's apartment over the laundromat. He had all the blinds closed. the room lit by the glow of his computer monitors. His laptop was open on the coffee table, cables running everywhere. He looked even worse in daylight. Eyes bloodshot, hands fluttery. He did not do the usual joking around. He just said, "Watch this," and hit play on a video. It was a cut-together version of the night, edited rough. Our walk through the cemetery. The empty rows of stones. The long shot toward the collapsed mausoleum. No woman anywhere, at any point. But the crying was there, threaded through the footage like a separate track. Not louder when the camera turned toward that corner, not fainter when it swung away. As if the microphone was picking it up from inside itself. Then he paused the video, scrubbed to a frame near the end, when we were almost back at the gate. He zoomed in on my back. There, just behind my left shoulder, was a shape. It was faint, like a reflection on glass, but it was there. A woman's face, tilted, hair hanging dank around it, eyes looking not at the camera, but at me. Her mouth was open like she was in the middle of that question, but the frame had frozen her between syllables. Caleb did this little half laugh, half cough sound. "Now watch this," he said, and stepped through the frames one at a time. In the first, she was there behind me. In the next, gone. Just me and the rows of stones. One frame. That is all. He said he had checked the other angles too, including the footage from the camera I had been holding. In that one, there was a moment when I swung past the mausoleum, and the image glitched for a second. A single stutter where the pixels smeared. In that smear, if you paused it just right, you could see the same face, eyes fixed on something over my shoulder. I did not want to look anymore. I stood up, paced, felt like the room was shrinking. Caleb said he had tried to clean up the audio, to isolate the crying, and when he did, he found that under the main track there was another sound, so low it barely registered as anything. He boosted it and played it for me. It was like listening to someone talk in the next room with a fan on. He said, "I think it is the same question, just lower, like it is underneath everything." I told him to stop, to shut it down, to delete the files. He stared at me like I had suggested burning money. I told him there was a difference between real and worth it. I told him I had not felt right since we left that place, that my chest hurt and my dreams were full of someone standing just outside the bedroom door. I left before he could play anything else. That night, I tried to keep my routine. Dinner, dishes, some dumb show, but every time there was a quiet moment, I would hear that question slide into the space. "Have you seen my boy?" Not out loud, not like a voice in the room, but in my head, perfectly clear. The same tone, the same rhythm. I turned the TV up so loud the speakers crackled. I slept with the light on, which I have not done since I was a kid. It did not help. At some point, I must have fallen into a shallow sleep, because I woke up to the sound of gravel outside, like someone walking slowly up the driveway. My heart started pounding so hard I could see my pulse in my vision. I told myself it was the neighbor, or a stray dog, or the noise from the street echoing weird. Then, something tapped the front step. Not a knock, just this light, deliberate tap, like someone nudging the concrete with the toe of their shoe. I lay there staring at the ceiling, breathing through my mouth, because I was afraid if I breathed through my nose, I would smell that wet earth and plastic flowers. The silence that followed felt thick, like a blanket over the house. I did not get up to look. I could not have made my legs move if I tried. The next morning, there were no footprints in the gravel when I finally went outside. I told myself again that I was letting Caleb's stuff get to me, that I was tired, that my brain was playing tricks. Then I went to the grocery store to pick up a few things. I was halfway down the aisle with the cereal when I froze. There, on the end cap, was a little cardboard sign promoting some back-to-school sale, and someone had taped up a missing kid flyer under it. The boy's picture was maybe 10 years old. Dark hair, serious eyes, one of those stiff school portraits. I could not read the name right away because my vision tunneled. All I could see was his face and the word boy in big letters in the description. The hairs on the back of my neck lifted. A hand landed on my shoulder and I jumped so hard I almost knocked over the display. It was Caleb. He looked rough. I mean really rough. Dark circles, skin sallow. He said he had been calling me, that I had not answered. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls, 2 texts. I had turned the volume all the way down the night before and never turned it up again. He said he had uploaded a short teaser of the cemetery footage, just some atmospheric shots, nothing crazy, no audio of the crying yet, and that the video had done numbers fast. Comments full of people saying they heard something in the background that creeped them out even though he had not boosted the sound. People asking who the woman was, saying they saw a figure in the corner even though we never caught her in those clips. And then, he said, the messages started. Not public comments, private ones. People from around town saying the woman sounded familiar. Not her voice, but the way she talked. That weird phrasing. Have you seen my boy? He kept talking, words tumbling out. Something about how he felt like he had to go back out there. How he could not stop thinking about that empty grave she knelt at. That is the first time he mentioned the grave. I realized we had never gone back to look at the stone after she vanished. We had just run. He said he went back that morning, in daylight, by himself. He said he walked straight to the spot. Checked the headstone. It had a man's name on it. Middle-aged when he died, dates from the 70s. No mention of children. He said he even went to the records office in town on his way in to work to check the obituary. The guy had never married. No kids. Lived alone on a farm. Died of a heart thing. Nothing in his life story about any boy. No reason for a woman to be kneeling there asking about a child. When he said that, my stomach did this slow roll. I looked back at the missing kid flyer. At the word, boy. The dates did not match anything that made sense. The kid had only been gone a few months, taken from a town 2 counties over. No mention of Redgate. No mention of any cemeteries. But my brain kept trying to connect them anyway. Like it had gotten stuck on that word. I left my cart right there and walked out of the store. Caleb followed me into the parking lot, calling after me, asking if I would come over later to watch through more of the footage, to help him figure out how to present it without getting too many people out there at night. I told him I had to go to work, even though I had already told my boss I was sick. I got in my truck and drove aimlessly for an hour, down roads I do not usually take, just trying to burn off the feeling that something was pressing on the back of my neck. That was the day I started changing routes. At first, it was just avoiding the road that went directly past the cemetery. I told myself it was because I did not want to think about the whole thing every time I saw the gate. I added 10 minutes to my commute going around. Then it spread. If I saw even the hint of headstones off to the side of a highway, I would take the next exit and loop around. I stopped going to funerals altogether. When my coworker's uncle died, I sent a card and some flowers, said I had to work. The truth was the idea of standing at the edge of a hole in the ground while somebody lowered a box into it made my skin crawl. Caleb kept texting for a while, sending little updates about the video, how it was doing, what people were saying. Then, about a week after we went out there, the messages changed. He said he had been hearing the crying at night, not from his speakers or headphones, but from the hallway outside his bedroom. He said it always stopped when he opened the door, picked up again when he lay back down. He started recording in his apartment, just setting his phone on the dresser and letting it run while he pretended to sleep, trying to catch the sound. He said the recordings picked up little things, a creak, a soft intake of breath. The word boy whispered so low he had to blast the volume to catch it. I told him to delete everything and stop, to take the video down, to wipe the drives, to treat it like a bad infection and cut it out. He laughed at me. said I was letting fear win. 2 days later, he stopped answering my texts. I figured he was busy, or mad at me for not helping more. Then the manager at the grocery store came by the shop asking if I had seen him, said he had missed 2 shifts, which was not like him. His car was still in the lot at the laundromat. They found the door locked from the inside, windows latched. No, Caleb. His laptop was still open on the coffee table, screen dark. They took it, tried to go through it, I guess. I do not know what the official word is. That is the sort of thing people say when they do not want to look at the hole someone left. I know this much. The night after he went missing, I woke up to my phone buzzing on the nightstand. There was no number on the screen, just the word unknown. When I answered, there was no greeting, no static, just that voice, soft and clear, and too close to my ear. Same display, same question. I turned the phone off, pulled the battery, left it on the dresser, and sat on the floor with my back against the bed, knees up, hands pressed over my ears, like that would help. The thing is, it did not matter if the phone was on or not. I could still hear her, not speaking full sentences, not crying like before, just that one question, over and over, in the same tone, with the same pause between the words. It has been weeks now, maybe months. I am not keeping track. I stopped going to work. I told my boss I needed time off, and when he started to ask why, I hung up. I avoid the grocery store, the church, any place where there might be talk of funerals or missing people. I moved my bed into the center of the room, so it would be as far from the walls and the windows as possible. It does not help. At night, it sounds like she is walking circles around the trailer, feet crunching on the gravel, brushing past the siding. Sometimes the crying comes back, very faint, like she is trying to hold it in and cannot quite manage it. Sometimes I hear a lighter, faster set of steps behind hers, like a kid running to catch up. I do not go to the door. I do not look out the windows. The few times I have caught my own reflection in the glass, I could have sworn there was someone just behind my shoulder, hair hanging down, head tilted too far. I keep thinking about that empty grave she knelt at, about the man who died alone and was buried quietly with no wife, no children, no one to come and cry over him. I keep thinking about the way she asked the question, not like a mother in a panic, not like someone who had lost a kid at the mall, but like someone stuck in a loop she could not break, forced to repeat the same words forever. Have you seen my boy? Like she does not know what boy, or when she lost him, or where she is supposed to find him. Like the question is all that is left of who she was. I know what you are thinking. You are thinking I should move, get as far away from Red Gate as I can. I even packed a bag once, stood in the doorway with my keys in my hand. Then, from the direction of the truck, I heard it. Her voice, very soft, from the passenger seat. Have you seen my boy? Not angry, not pleading, just asking. I dropped the keys. I stayed inside. Here is the part that scares me the most. More than the crying, more than the face in the footage, more than the calls with no number. Sometimes, when I am really tired, when my thoughts start to blur at the edges and my head feels too heavy for my neck, I catch myself almost answering her. The words rise up in my throat without my permission. I have to bite them back, because I know, deep down in the part of me that still works, that the second I answer, the second I say anything back, something will shift. The question will not be a question anymore. It will be an invitation, or a door, or a hand reaching out that I will not be able to pull away from. So I sit here, night after night, listening to her circle the trailer, listening to her ask that same wrong question, and I do not answer. I am parked out by the cemetery gate right now, in my truck, engine off so she does not hear it. My phone is on the dashboard, screen dark. but every few minutes it lights up on its own. Unknown calling, unknown calling, unknown calling. And I know exactly what I will hear if I pick up. You asked why I will not walk past cemeteries anymore. This is why. Because once you hear someone asking for a child that never existed, kneeling at a grave that never belonged to any boy, once you see a face appear in one frame and vanish in the next, like she only remembered to be there for a second, you realize some questions are not meant to be answered, and some people are still out there asking them anyway, over and over, in the dark, waiting for someone tired enough, or scared enough, or lonely enough to finally say yes. The shadow trapped behind the gates of St. Bernard Cemetery. My name's Daniel Roper. I'm from Arabi, just outside New Orleans, Louisiana. And I work as a night delivery driver for a restaurant supply warehouse, and I need you to listen to me, because I am sitting in my car by a cemetery right now, and my hands are still shaking when I pull up near any set of iron gates that look even a little bit like the ones at St. Bernard's. And if I do not say this out loud, I feel like it is just going to sit in my chest and rot there until something else decides to answer it instead. So just let me talk. Man, just let me get it out. I remember the day it started, down to stupid little things that should not matter. Like what I had for breakfast and the way my shirt felt on my neck. It was a Tuesday, late October. The kind of day that starts off sticky and warm, even though the calendar says it should be cooler. And I had 2 eggs at the counter, white toast, and one of those cheap sausages that leaves grease on the plate you can draw lines through. My mom called while I was eating to remind me that the power bill was due and to tell me my uncle had fallen again. And I told her I would swing by on my way back from the depot if I did not get stuck on the route. I remember staring at the time on my phone, 3:42 inches the afternoon, and thinking I had just enough time to nap before I had to be on shift. I wore the same navy warehouse shirt I always wear, the one with my name stitched crooked over the chest, and I noticed for the first time that there was a faint ring of old sweat around the collar that would not wash out anymore. I put on my steel-toe boots, checked that my keys, wallet, and phone were in my pockets, and I headed out the door, and absolutely nothing about it felt strange at the time. Punch in by 6 in the evening, load the truck. Try to get everything done before the bars close and the drunk folks start weaving into the side streets. I signed my name on the log sheet at 5:58 p.m., the ink catching a little where the pen skips over the same spot other guys have pressed too hard. My supervisor, Ron, slapped the back of my shoulder and told me I had the uptown run and a couple extra drops out along the parish line because someone called in sick. I grumbled in my head about the extra stops, not out loud, just that small, tired feeling when you know you are not getting home before sunrise. Most of it was the usual. Boxes of napkins, frozen fries, cleaning chemicals, drums of cooking oil, those big bags of ice that make your fingers burn if you grab them without gloves, and at the bottom of the list was a newer client, some little bar that opened closer to St. Bernard's than I like being at night. I did not think about the cemetery when I saw the address. Not then. It was just another line. Another place I had to find. We loaded the truck together, the warehouse guys tossing boxes down the roller, me stacking them in the back, sweating under the fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead. I remember the smell of the place, cold from the walk-in freezers and warm from the forklifts, cardboard dust in the air, that faint sour smell of spilled fryer oil that never really goes away. My hands got that thin pattern of lines from the cardboard edges, and I wiped my face on my sleeve and checked my route again. 7 stops in New Orleans proper, 2 more along the parish line, then back in if nothing went wrong. Nothing about that paper said I would end up sitting outside an old cemetery gate, praying that the truck would start, talking myself out of leaving it there and walking home in the dark. The first part of the night was boring, in that way you start to count on. I hit a po' boy shop off Claiborne, a little diner that still runs 24 hours because the owner refuses to give up. A bar with a busted neon sign where the bartender flirted just enough to get me to unload the boxes a little closer to the door. People talk to me about the same things they always talk about. The saints, the weather, how the city is not what it used to be. One cook complained about the price of cooking oil. Another guy asked me if we had any special on paper cups. I checked my phone every hour or so when I got back in the truck. 9:12 p.m., 10:27 p.m., 11:01 p.m. Somewhere in there, my mom texted me a picture of my uncle on the couch, his leg wrapped, thumbs up, saying he was fine. I answered with a little thumbs up of my own and told her I would call on my lunch. I ate half a cold sandwich around midnight sitting in the cab, listening to the hum of the truck and some late-night talk radio that faded in and out. When you drive nights long enough, cemeteries just become another thing you pass. White stones, dark trees, little flags, the way flowers show up and disappear, that is all background after a while. I had passed street, Bernard's in the daytime a few times, but never really looked at the gate. It is one of those old iron things, dark green or black, with pointed tips and a big arch with the name cut into it, and there is a narrow road that runs right along the front with a little shoulder where people park when they visit. That night it was just an address on my paper, a point my GPS recognized even if half the other streets in that area were half wrong on the map. My last city stop took longer than it should have because the manager wanted me to count every single box, and by the time I pulled out of their lot, my dash clock said 1:43 a.m. I remember that number clear. I was tired, eyes burning, shoulders tight from lifting. The last stop before turning around to head back was that new bar near the cemetery. I punched the address into the GPS, and the little voice told me to turn onto this street and that one, cutting me through quiet neighborhoods where the houses sat low and close together, some windows still glowing blue from televisions, and some shut dark like no one had lived there in years. The closer I got to the address, the quieter it got. The music from the other bars faded. The traffic sounds thinned out. I rolled the window down a crack because the windshield was starting to fog on the inside from my breath and the change in temperature, and the air that came in had that damp smell it gets down here at night, like wet concrete and river water and old leaves. I turned one more corner and saw the gate. It rose up out of the dark all at once, not lit up, just this black shape against a grayish sky. The streetlights in that stretch are useless. They shine, but they do not seem to land on anything. On my left, beyond the low curb, all those headstones and crosses and small statues spread out behind the iron fence. And on my right was a line of tired houses with sagging porches. The GPS told me the bar was half a block past the cemetery, so I eased the truck along the fence. That was the first night I parked there, right by the main gate, tires crunching on the gravel strip that separated the asphalt from the fence line. I killed the high beams and left the parking lights on. The bar was dark. A single neon beer sign blinked in one window, but the door was locked, and there was a paper sign taped up saying they had closed early for a private event. No one answered my knock. I called the number on the order sheet, and it rang and rang. I left a message the way we are supposed to, saying this is Daniel with the delivery. I am here at 2:03 a.m. No one answering. I will reschedule. Then I walked back to the truck, annoyed, tired, more focused on the fact that I had wasted time for nothing than on where I was standing. If nothing had happened right then, I would have just driven away and that would have been the end of it. But I was already there, and I needed to check my route sheet and log the missed delivery. And I did not want to do that while driving. So I climbed into the cab, shut the door, left the engine running on a light idle, and pulled out the paperwork with the dome light casting that dull yellow glow over everything. I heard it for the first time while I was writing the note. A scrape. 2 short taps. Metal on metal. Soft but steady. It came from my left, from the direction of the fence. I figured it was a branch, or maybe the wind pushing something. I kept writing. Then there was a second sound, slower, like something heavy shifting on gravel. I looked up, turned my head toward the gate. That was the first time I saw the shadow. It stood just inside the main opening, behind the bars of the gate. Tall and narrow and too straight. Not a person in a coat. Not someone leaning, just a dark shape standing where there was nothing to cast it. There was no car behind it, no streetlight shining from the side, no person in the opening, just the outline of something that blocked the faint light from far behind. It was like those cheap cardboard cutouts you see in store windows, except there was nothing in front of it that could have made it. It did not move toward me, it just stood there. I remember squinting, trying to make sense of it. I turned the radio down. I flipped the high beams on so they splashed light across the road, the fence, the gate. The beams lit up the iron bars, the gravel, the low column on either side. But the inside of the cemetery stayed strangely flat. The shadow stayed where it was, and it did not stretch or fall away like it should have when the angle of my lights changed. I told myself it was just the way the light hit a tree or a big monument back there. Something simple, and I must have stared too long because I realized I was holding my breath. I let it out, laughed in that short way you do when you know you are alone and feel foolish. And I picked up my phone to log the failed delivery. When I looked back up, the shadow was closer to the bars. Not all the way up to them, but closer. It had not moved in the way people move. One moment it was centered deeper in the opening. The next it was nearer, shoulders, if you can call them that, lined up with the vertical bars, but still on the inside. My throat went dry. I checked the side mirrors, the rear view, the road behind me. Nothing. No other cars, no people walking. Just my idling engine and that thing that did not want to be a thing in my head. I told myself I was tired. I looked down deliberately, made myself focus on the numbers on the route sheet. Letters leaning downhill. I finished the note, stuck it in the clipboard, and forced myself to look back at the gate again, telling myself it would be gone because it was never really there. It was not gone. It was at the bars. This time, it was right up against them, pressed to the inside of the gate. The shape was wrong, too tall. The upper part narrow and then wider where the arms would be. But the arms themselves, if that is what they were not hanging. They were set at an angle, like it had braced them against the bars. For a second, my brain filled in details that could not have been there. Hands on the iron, fingers around the metal, dark on dark. I could not see eyes, but I felt the exact place where its head would be pointed straight at the truck. I said out loud, "No," just that word, and my voice sounded small in the cab. I reached for the key to throw the truck in gear, and that was when the engine died. It did not sputter. It did not cough. It just went from that soft rumble under my feet to silence so fast it felt like someone had pressed a mute button on everything. The dash lights stayed on. The dome light stayed on. The radio crackled, then went dead too. I twisted the key. Nothing. Not even a click. Every driver knows that sound you get when a battery is bad, that repeated tick. But there was none of that. It was like the circuit was fine, but the engine had decided not to exist. The silence outside got heavy. I could hear little details that should have been too soft at that distance, like a piece of plastic flour on a grave rattling against its wire stem somewhere in the dark, or the faint grind of gravel shifting under weight where no one was walking. I kept my eyes on the key, on my hand, on the dash, because a part of me knew that if I looked left again and it was closer, I would do something stupid, like jump out and run, and I did not know where I would run to, not with the cemetery on one side and the empty houses on the other. My phone buzzed, sudden and sharp. I almost dropped it. A text came in from my mom. "You okay? Still working?" I stared at the words, my reflection small and warped in the glass. I wanted to call her, to hear another voice, but I pictured explaining that I was stuck by a cemetery at 2 a.m. because the truck died and there was a shadow at the gate. And I imagined the way she would go quiet, the way she does when she does not know whether to worry or to pray, and I did not want that sound in my ear. So I lied and texted back, "All good. On last stop. Call you after." I finally looked back at the gate. The shadow had not crossed the threshold. It was still inside, still pressed to the bars. But it had changed. I realized it was not just standing there. It was lined up with my driver's side door. The gate itself was maybe 20 feet from the truck, but the thing behind it was now positioned so that if you drew a straight line from where I sat through the glass, through the air, through the fence, you would hit what felt like its center. I felt watched in a way I do not know how to put into better words. It was like when somebody stands too close behind you in a line, not touching, not talking, but you can feel the heat of them and you know exactly where they are without looking. My chest got tight. I reached for the key again, twisted harder even though I knew that did not do anything. I said, "Come on, come on, come on," under my breath, like maybe I could talk it into life. "I swear to God, not now," I said. And the words tasted stale. I checked the fuel gauge, the battery light, all the little idiot lights on the dash. Everything looked normal. It just would not start. I told myself it was a coincidence. All of it. The timing, the gate, my own tired brain. I told myself if I treated it like that, it would be that. So, I did what you do when a truck stalls. I took a breath, counted to 10, then tried again. This time, when I turned the key, there was a faint sound. Not from the engine, not from under the hood. It came from outside, from the direction of the cemetery. It sounded like the same key turn, the same mechanical twist, but made of metal on stone, a lock being tried on something very old. It happened at the exact same pace I moved my wrist. The gate did not open. The shadow did not move, but the sound matched my motion. I jerked my hand away from the ignition like it had burned me. For a minute, I just sat there doing nothing at all, feeling my heartbeat in my teeth. I am telling you, man, I am not the kind of person who jumps at everything. I have worked nights for years. I have seen people yelling at nobody in parking lots. I have seen fights spill into the street. I have seen cars crash, and I have had to crawl under shelves in a walk-in freezer because a storm knocked the power out. I handle things, but this felt wrong in a different way, like the world itself had tilted, and I was the only one who noticed. A car turned onto the road from the opposite end, its lights bouncing over the asphalt as it hit the little potholes. For the first time since the engine died, I felt something like relief. Another person meant another set of eyes, another engine, another battery. Some kind of normal sound to break whatever this was. The car rolled toward us slow, probably seeing my truck and wondering what I was doing half up on the gravel. As the lights swept across the gate, the shadow clinging to the inside of the bars changed. It did not walk away. There was no movement. It just unhooked from the bars and thinned until it looked like smoke. Not the drifting kind. It rose once, straight up along the bars. Then it was gone, like it had been sucked up into the iron. The car passed me. I caught a glimpse of the driver, a lady in her 40s maybe. Hair pulled back, eyes on the road. She did not look toward the gate. She did not slow down. In the wash of her taillights, the cemetery behind the fence looked empty again. Just shapes and stones. The truck engine started on the next turn of the key. No grinding, no delay, just that instant roar of something that had never had a problem. I drove away without checking the mirrors, without looking back. I did not even log the exact time I left. I just needed distance between me and that fence. When I got back to the depot, I parked in my assigned spot. He glanced at the missed delivery and said, "They doing that thing again? Shutting early?" And I said yes, and left it at that. I almost told him. I opened my mouth to say something about the engine dying, about seeing someone at the gate, and then I pictured his face doing that thing people do when they are trying not to smile at something they think is silly, and I shut up. I clocked out at 4:22 a.m., drove home along a route that stayed as far away from any cemetery as I could manage, and collapsed on my bed, still in my uniform. I dreamed about nothing, just black, like the inside of a closed garage. The next night, I checked the route sheet as soon as I punched in. I should have asked to switch. I should have made an excuse. I told myself the truck had just stalled, and that my brain had turned a shadow from a tree or a monument into something weird because I was tired. That is what I told myself, over and over, while my hand traced down the list and landed on the same address near street, Bernard's. I stared at it. Ron saw me looking and said, "They better be open tonight. I'm tired of rotating their ice order." And I said something like, "Yeah, hope so," and took the keys. The whole first half of the shift, I tried not to think about that last stop. I focused on the usual nonsense. Traffic, bad directions, a guy arguing that his order was short when it was not. The radio helped. People calling in to talk about a game, a new law, whatever. Just noise. But every time I glanced at the clock, the number pulled me closer to that stretch of road. 1:10 a.m., 1:34 a.m. I finished the stop before the bar faster than usual and found myself with no more excuses to drag it out. I pulled onto the same street, rolled down the same window, felt the same damp, heavy air slip in. As the truck came in line with the cemetery fence, my hands tightened on the wheel. It is funny, the things you notice when you are trying not to look at something. I saw the cracks in the sidewalk on the opposite side, the little tuft of grass that had forced its way up through the asphalt near the curb, a torn plastic bag caught in a ditch. I saw all of that instead of the gate until I could not avoid it anymore. The bar was open this time. Music and light spilled out of the doorway. 2 people smoked outside under a flickering security light. I drove a little past the gate so I could back up and angle the truck toward their loading door. That meant my driver's side ended up parallel to the fence again. I killed the engine myself this time. Walked around to the back, unloaded 3 boxes of napkins and 2 crates of liquor. The guy who signed for it was half distracted, eyes on the game playing on the TV over the bar. I told myself that was proof that the night before had just been, I do not know, a bad mix of low blood sugar and nerves. Instead, I leaned against the side of the truck for a minute to stretch my back. My phone buzzed with a notification. Some stupid app reminding me to drink water. I took a sip from the bottle in the cab, wiped my mouth with the back of my hand, and that was when I heard it again. Metal on metal, soft. 2 taps, a slow scrape, coming from my left. From the gate, I turned my head before I could talk myself out of it. The shadow was there, inside the gate, deeper in than it had been at the end of last night. Not by the bars, but maybe 10, 15 feet back, in the middle of the path. Again, there was no reason for a shadow like that. The lights from the bar fell short of the fence. The streetlights behind me made a puddle of yellow a few yards up the road, but did not reach that far. The only light back there was something faint and gray from the sky, and there was nothing solid in the opening that matched the shape I saw. No tall monument, no tree trunk, no person, just that upright dark that felt more like a hole cut out of the scene than something added to it. I froze. My first thought was that it had been waiting. Not for me personally. I do not think I was that important to it. Just for someone who would stop between the road and the fence long enough to notice. Maybe the night before, I had given it my attention, and that was all it needed. "Dude," I whispered to myself, and my voice sounded small again. I did not move. I did not step closer or away. The air felt thick. Nothing else around us moved. No cars passed. No dogs barked. Even the music from the bar sounded muffled, like someone had thrown a blanket over the world. I thought if I blinked, it would jump closer like last time, so I forced myself to blink constantly, just to see. It did not jump that way. This time, it waited until I turned away. I made myself break eye contact. I told myself, do not give it the satisfaction of being the only thing you see, which is a stupid thought, but it is what went through my head. I bent down to pick up a stray piece of plastic wrap that had fallen from one of the boxes, and in that second, when my eyes were off the gate, my ears heard that gravel sound again. When I straightened up, the shadow was closer by a good step or two, still inside the fence, still centered on my door. That is when my legs started to tremble. I am not proud of it, but I almost dropped the plastic. I said out loud, to nobody visible, "I see you," and I do not even know why. Maybe it was a way of telling myself I was not crazy, that there was something there to see. The words came out thin. The shape did not react. No wave, no tilt, just stillness. I backed up toward the cab of the truck, keeping my eyes locked on that dark patch, one hand stretched behind me to find the handle. When my fingers closed around it, I yanked the door open, climbed in, and slammed it shut with more force than necessary. The engine came alive right away, thank God. That I saw something weird and my truck stalled once, and that is all. But that was not the end. It might have been easier if it had been. Over the next week, every route I ran took me near some cemetery. We have clients all over, and this city is full of places for the dead. You do not really notice how many until you try to avoid them. I started changing my paths just a little, skipping a faster street because I knew it ran alongside a row of headstones, taking the long way around a block. At first, it was just habit. Then it turned into this tightening in my chest anytime I saw iron bars and stone markers in the same frame. The thing at street. Bernard's never stepped outside the gate. As far as I could tell, that is important. It did not cross. It stayed behind the bars, but it was not stuck in one place. Twice more, I had a late route that took me past that fence. I did not have to stop there again because the bar switched their delivery window to earlier in the night, thank God, but I still had to drive by. Both times, I swore I could feel something turn its attention as my headlights slid across those letters on the arch. I never saw it full on again the way I did that first and second night, because I deliberately did not look. But in that quick sideways flash you get when you pass a thing out of the corner of your eye, there was something tall just inside the gate that did not match the usual shapes I remembered. I started sleeping badly. Not with nightmares exactly. Just this feeling of always being slightly awake, even when I was supposed to be out cold from exhaustion. I would dream that I was driving and the road would keep bending along a fence line no matter which turn I took. Sometimes there were gaps in the fence, and sometimes there were not. And I always told myself in the dream that if I could just get past the last gate, I would be fine. But the road never reached it. I would wake up with my heart racing, sheets twisted, my phone lying on my chest where I must have fallen asleep scrolling through videos to distract myself. I avoided anything with cemeteries in it, movies, photos, stories. I turned off the radio if someone started talking about a funeral. I changed the subject when my mom brought up my grandfather's grave. I was not going back there. Not if I could help it. About a month after that first night, when the memory had started to scab over a little but had not healed, I got a different kind of shift. One of the other drivers, Marcus, needed to switch, so I took his route. It was supposed to keep me on the other side of the city. I actually felt lighter when I scanned the list. No stops anywhere near Street Bernard's. I thought I had dodged it, that maybe this was the universe giving me a break. The roads were quieter than usual, the clients polite, even the bar managers were less grumpy. It was one of those rare runs where things just worked. My last stop wrapped up early, a little before 2 in the morning. The thing about those apps is they do not care what you are driving past. They just look for the fastest way home. It took me maybe 10 minutes to realize it was guiding me back along the parish line. By the time I noticed, I was already in that part of town where the street names start to feel familiar from other nights. I could have turned it off and guessed my own way back, but I made the mistake of thinking, it is fine. I am not stopping. I am just driving through. It will be okay. The houses thinned out. Trees leaned in from one side in tall, dark shapes. My headlights cut a cone through the air, catching street signs, the edges of parked cars. the occasional cat darting from one yard to another. I turned one more corner, and the GPS voice said, "Continue straight for half a mile." And I knew, before I saw it, that the next major thing on my left would be the cemetery. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles hurt. I told myself to breathe. It is just a place. Stones, dirt, markers. It is only bad if you make it bad in your head. I swallowed and kept the truck at a steady speed. When the arch came into view, my first instinct was to stare straight ahead, to let it slide into my peripheral, and back out without acknowledging it. But there is a problem with pretending something is not there when you know it is. Your mind fills in the blanks with something worse. I felt that same prickling on the side of my face, that awareness of a line drawn between me and the gate. So I did the stupid thing and glanced. Just one quick look, the gate was closed as always. The iron bars were dark. The path inside was just a strip of lighter gravel leading into deeper shade. But in that split second, I could have sworn there was an outline. It was not as solid as before, more like the ghost of what I had seen, but it was enough. My foot pressed harder on the gas. The truck's speed climbed a little, tires humming. That is when the dash lights flickered. Only for a second, but enough to be noticeable. The radio cut out and came back. The temperature gauge dropped, then corrected. The headlight beam stuttered, like someone had waved a hand over them. I did not touch the controls. Every hair on my arm stood up. I did not stop. I drove straight through, telling myself, almost there. Almost past. And when the last bit of fence disappeared in the mirror, the dash steadied and the lights stopped misbehaving. I made it back to the depot in one piece. No stalled engine this time. No full stop by the gate. But it felt like something had leaned as close to the border as it could without crossing, just to remind me that it remembered. I started doing something new after that. Any time I had to pass any cemetery, not just that one, I turned the radio up, not to enjoy the music, just to fill the cab with as much other sound as possible, so that if there were scrapes or taps or gravel noises from the side of the road, I would not hear them. If I had to park near a fence, I would angle the truck so that my door did not face it directly. I stopped doing day visits to my grandfather's grave, which my mom noticed. "You have not gone with me in months," she said one Saturday when she came by with leftover food. "You used to help me clean the stone." I told her work was killing me and I needed to sleep whenever I could. She looked at me for a long time, like she wanted to ask what was really going on, but she let it go. I felt guilty, still feel guilty, but the thought of standing between rows of stones again, even in daylight, makes my stomach twist. A couple nights ago, I almost proved to myself that this is not over. That is why I am talking into my phone at 3 in the morning, in this car parked by another cemetery. Not the same one, but close enough in feeling that my skin will not settle down. I had a delivery out by a church that has a burial ground wrapped tight around it, graves packed right up against the walls. The whole place crowded and old. I told myself it was different. Different side of town. Different layout. Different everything. The drive there was uneventful. I parked in the little lot across from the front steps, loaded the dolly, hauled the boxes in. The pastor signed the slip himself, cheerful, thanking me for bringing the coffee and sugar they had ordered for some event. While I was inside, I felt almost normal. Warm light, wooden pews, people pictures on bulletin boards. Then I stepped back into the cold air and realized the path from the church door to the truck took me right along a low stone wall that separated the lot from the graveyard. There was no fence, just that waist-high border and then a spread of headstones in every direction. It was late, but not that late. Maybe 11:40 p.m. The sky was cloudy. The air tasted like damp stone again. I walked faster, the dolly rattling over cracked pavement. As I passed the corner where the wall met the iron gate leading into the burial ground, I felt that same sensation as before, like a line snapped taut from somewhere just inside to where I stood. I stopped. I do not know why. Maybe part of me was tired of pretending. Maybe I needed to know if this thing was stuck in one place or if it had found other gates. I turned my head and looked through the bars. There was no tall shadow figure this time, no clear shape, just rows of stones and a statue of an angel with its head bowed, wings curled in. For a moment, I actually felt relief so strong my knees almost buckled. I took a breath I had not realized I had been holding. Then the security light above the church door behind me clicked off. It should not have. Those lights stay on all night. I know because I have done enough church deliveries to notice. The sudden absence of that light threw everything into a flat gray. The angel statue in front of me seemed to soften at the edges. In that weird in-between, before my eyes adjusted, the space between the first two rows of graves, right in line with the gate, darkened. Not like a cloud moving, not like a shadow stretching, just a small vertical slice of darker space that did not match the rest, that made the angel look like it was turned slightly away from it, even though I knew it was carved that way. My throat went dry again. I whispered, "No, no, no," under my breath. I heard the crunch of something on gravel from inside, even though I could not see anyone moving. That was enough. I yanked the dolly the rest of the way to the truck, shoved it into the back, and climbed into the cab so fast I banged my knee on the steering column. I sat there with the doors locked, even though I knew that did not mean anything if this was not about actual people. The engine turned over fine. The radio came on halfway through a song. My phone screen lit up with the time. 11:47 p.m. glowing faintly on the seat beside me. I stared straight ahead and drove away, taking the longest possible way back that kept me between rows of houses instead of rows of stones. That is where I am now. Different cemetery, different gate. Same feeling crawling under my skin. I parked just far enough down the street that I can still see the edge of the fence in my side mirror if I angle it. But I do not let myself look. The truck is off. My personal car is sitting here instead, engine ticking as it cools down. I borrowed my mom's old sedan this week because the truck makes a noise I do not like, and I am trying to tell myself that is the reason I pulled over, not because my chest started to tighten when I realized the shortcut I took home runs past another set of iron gates. It is 3 a.m. again. My phone battery is lower than it should be. The street around me is quiet. Somewhere behind me, behind that fence, there is a whole field of stones. Names carved into them. Dates that start and stop, and I cannot stand the thought of reading any of them in case one of them decides to answer back. I have not walked into a cemetery since that night at Street Bernard's. I will not. I cross the street if I see one during the day. I change routes at the last minute. My friends joke that I am allergic to funerals. One of them, Marcus, asked me last week to be a pallbearer for his cousin, and I told him work would not give me the day off. He believed me. He did not see how my hands shook when he mentioned the cemetery by name. I do not tell people about the shadow. Because you are not here. Because you cannot turn your head and see what I saw. And maybe distance makes it safer. Or maybe it does not. Maybe just saying its pattern out loud draws a line somewhere I cannot see. I do not know. I just know that I do not walk past cemeteries anymore. I do not let myself end up parked by their gates. If I can help it, engine off, in the dark, with only my own reflection in the glass, to keep me company. I used to think of them as quiet places for other people's memories. Now, they feel like something else entirely. Not evil. Exactly. Just hungry in a way that has nothing to do with food. Hungry for attention. For the moment your eyes lock on a patch of space that should be empty and you realize it is not. If you asked me to prove any of this, I could not. The truck is fine on paper. No mechanic has found anything wrong. The electrical tests come back clean. The route logs show I was where I said I was when I said it, and there is nothing in the security footage from the bar that night that points toward the gate. I checked. I went back during the day once, telling myself I was being an adult about it. The iron looked normal. The path was just a path. The gates creaked a little when the groundskeeper opened them. He did not see anything strange. He has been working there for years. Maybe it is only people like me. People who stop in the wrong place at the wrong time. Who notice when something stands just inside the line and waits to see if you will look away. Maybe that is all that happened. I stopped. I noticed. It moved. And now every fence with stone behind it carries a piece of that memory, like a bad reflection that shows up in every mirror you pass. I keep thinking about that sound the first night. The way the key turned in my ignition matched a metal twist from the gate. I keep wondering if I did something then, if I opened something I could not see. Maybe nothing passed through. Maybe it cannot. Maybe that is the only rule. It can come to the gate. It can press its weight against the bars. It can watch, but it cannot cross. That should make me feel safer than it does, because gates are everywhere. Churchyards, small town burial grounds, little fenced plots on the side of highways where flowers wilt in old jars. And I drive past them all the time, and I can feel the weight of eyes where there are no faces. And I have changed my life in dumb, quiet ways, just to avoid having to walk along the fence line. I am still working nights, because I need the money, and because the idea of switching to days and seeing it in full, clear sunlight scares me more than the dark somehow. I still talk to my mom on the phone. I still eat my eggs and toast when I can. I still put on the same navy shirt, with my name stitched crooked on the chest, and pretend I am just a man in a truck doing a job. When I check my route and see any address that gets me close to a graveyard, I feel that same cold line across my ribs, and I know that somewhere, just inside the nearest gate, there is a place where the shadows do not behave the way they should, waiting for somebody to stop long enough to notice. I am telling you this so that if you drive for a living, or deliver late at night, or cut through a side street because it is faster, and your engine dies when you roll to a stop by a cemetery fence, and you hear something shift on gravel where no one is walking, you will not tell yourself it is nothing. You do not have to believe me now. You probably will not. You will think I am tired, or stressed, or making patterns where none exist. That is fine. I thought that too at first, but if you ever find yourself with your hands on a steering wheel, parked by iron bars, with the lights flickering and the radio cutting out, and the air suddenly so still that you can hear plastic flowers tapping against their wires, do one thing for me. Do not look away from the gate. Do not give it the chance to move while your eyes are somewhere else, because once you see where it can get to, you will never be able to drive past any place for the dead again without feeling it reach for you from just behind the fence.